while we struggle with ever-present technology issues, right there. All right, if you could all stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can you reach the light? Okay, there have been some minor changes to the agenda, and those are noted on your packet, which brings us to the consent agenda.
I move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
A second. With first and second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved. Okay. Would anybody here like to address the council for an item outside of the agenda? Okay.
So if you could state your name for the record, please.
Oh, are you calling on me?
Oh, Mary, is that you?
Yes, I'm calling in because our Wi-Fi isn't very good this evening in Home Valley. Yes, Mary Rapar from Home Valley. Two things. I did send something to the City Council and to Administrator Kinley and Planner Schumacher. The first thing is I filed a complaint last week with the city about some spraying, actually dousing of pesticides that was done on the empty lot between Corona, their little thing, whatever, the food cart and the house that's south of it. I had a chiropractor's appointment and I came out and the west wind was blowing heavily and there was this liquid film that settled on my face and made my face numb. And I couldn't figure out what it was, but there was a horrible smell. So I investigated and I asked the young gentleman who was dousing the empty lot there on can't remember the name of the street there, right below Ann Luders's lot, what he was doing and what he was using. And he showed me the container of Crossbow that he was dousing the parcel with. Crossbow is a very dangerous chemical and it should not be used on windy days. It should not be used near children. It should definitely not be used near food, and especially near a doctor's office, which is the chiropractor's office to the east of that lot. So I really would urge you all to investigate banning pesticides within the city limit. I sent you a model ordinance from Portland, Maine, and they seem to have a very forward-looking and progressive view of not using pesticides. And it is not a human right to use pesticides if it affects other humans' lives and health. So I've sent you all an email. It was late this afternoon, but that I just want it for the record. The second thing is I spoke to Ben about this, and someone had asked me some questions about development in the city limits, and I didn't know about. Do you all verify the permit at the end of the construction and before the certificate of occupancy is given? I think we want to be sure that everybody goes by the permit, and he assured me that we do a final inspection or the building inspection. But some of the lots that are being built on seem to be very close to waters, like the ones up on Kanaka Street, those three houses on the east side, I guess, or right side as you're going up. And I'm not sure that they're within that permitted area. So I would just urge the city to trust but verify all building permits. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, finally getting close. All right, and how is Tim joining us?
He's on Zoom.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you for having me back. Would you like me to just start, Mayor?
Go for it.
Okay. The permits are still going well. Marlon and Arnold are miracle workers over there. They're working a lot of hours, still getting to everything. Since my last update, there have been 3 new single-family residents, 1 new commercial start, and then other mechanical roofing permits, patio permits, etc. I have looked through all of our notes, and I don't see where we've received any complaints so far. So those guys are really hopping and popping. I also, again, want to thank Mary and Sarah for their coordination. This could not work without them. And I know this is very short, but if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. I did, by the way, offer from Marlon and Arnold for either one of them to come and make the presentation. They haven't taken me up on that yet, but they might next time.
Any comments or questions for Tim?
Yeah, Tim, this is Paul Hendricks. I from time to time get approached by people who ask if I need a permit to do X. And my advice to them is to call City Hall and ask. Is there a website or something that would be another alternative for them to look at?
You know what, let me look into that. I know we have some information on our website. I don't know how intricate that is. And so when you say X, do you mean like putting on a roof or doing some interior plumbing or interior electrical or something like that?
Yes, those things, as well as deck. Somebody asked about painting their house, a fence being built, things like that.
So like a quick FAQ.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let me see what I can do. I will get back to you. Do you mind if I do that through Liana?
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Easy night for you,
Appreciate the
Tim.
update.
Do you,
I appreciate the update. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
and do you mind if I ask from Liana and staff, how's it been working from their perspective?
Yeah, no, it's been great from our perspective. Again, we've been working with the county to make sure that it's streamlined so that we catch them if there are any challenges. We catch them as they drop off the permit, because the largest delay is if they don't follow the code. And so just again, ensuring that our checklist and everything have it so it's visible, so it calls things out so that they catch it again before the permit even begins the process, to speed things up as it goes through. And yeah, Sarah and Mary and Andres have been working well with that process, and we haven't received any complaints either. I believe the complaint form on the county website comes to us. And
It does. Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and
Also that we,
I do want you to know that I am looking at our workload, and I may be asking the board to add another person in there, another inspector position. But if we start, especially if we start slipping beyond that 4 to 6 week time frame, then we're going to need to do that. So I'm going to begin those discussions with the board next week.
That's good news. I'm glad that there's the need for another employee. That means
Absolutely.
business is booming.
Thank you for your time.
All right, Tim, thanks for yours.
Thanks, Tim.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the public hearing. I see that there is no time, so we can just jump right in. I'd like to I would like to open the public hearing at 6:11. And staff report, please.
So the transportation improvement program hasn't changed since the last public hearing because council didn't request any changes to it. So it's as presented. One thing that was included was the traffic study that Mr. Rice was discussing at the last public hearing. That is included in the packet, and that was updated at about 11 o'clock noon today. That's all I have.
All right, are there any comments from the public?
We've asked Mr. Lee to speak on behalf of the neighborhood, and so when a lot of us are giving him our 3 minutes of time if there's a time limit in order for him to be able to answer any of your questions as well.
Great.
Thank you for allowing that.
All right, thank you. My name is Tom Lee. I'm with H. Lee Associates, and Pat Rice contacted me to do an analysis on basically Delray Avenue and the TIP project that was included in there. And what I'd like to do is just hand out the latest, just in case you didn't get it. This is our analysis.
Thank you.
And it's a little over 100 pages. So,
Light reading.
yeah, in case you can't sleep, you can maybe try to get through the whole thing. But what's interesting is when Pat came and talked to me about this, and I started doing some research on the project, I know that there's a lot of history, and I don't really want to go and rehash all the histories or why something happened. You know, this is just really simply right now. You know, there is a TIP project that includes Delray Avenue and its extension from where it ends to Kanaka Creek. And we're basically requesting that that be removed from the TIP. And there's a variety of reasons why we feel that it doesn't belong on the TIP. And it's covered in our memo, which is pretty thorough. And so I want to just give you kind of some quick highlights on why. You know, what's interesting about Delray Avenue is it's not a collector, it's not an arterial, it's simply a local street. And I don't think that can be disputed with what's documented in the TIP is you're looking at 9-foot lanes, and that just simply doesn't qualify as a collector. And the short length of it, it is a local road. I don't think that can be disputed. And what's interesting about that is typically in a TIP, you don't see local roads as part of the TIP improvement. The TIP is part of a bigger piece of the Growth Management Act and comprehensive planning, and it's a supporting document. And in those supporting documents, the scope of that is on the arterials and collectors on the major streets. And what's interesting about the local street is that's governed by the development code. And every developer that wants to develop land has to follow the development code. And the development code has plenty of requirements regarding the local street and the local street standard, how it's supposed to be developed. And so that's really where it needs to be relevant. And one thing that you have to look at when you look at that is also on the TIP projects. Those are on arterials and collectors, and that's where there's significant public benefit of those improvements on the arterial and collectors. And what you see in local streets is the benefit typically is to the developer and either the apartments or the homeowners. And that's simply not something that has enough public benefit to consider public funds for. And so even the sewer extension, who's it going to serve? It's going to serve the adjacent properties. So why is the city of Stevenson even thinking about funding that? That should be funded by private dollars through private development through those adjacent landowners. And so, you know, we feel strongly that, you know, the Delray Avenue issue is a development issue. It's not a TIP issue. It's not a comprehensive planning issue. It's not a city needs to plan for issue. And so we feel that it should be removed from the TIP. Now, you know, the other thing is that the rest of the process, I know that there's a road development agreement and lien. I know that, you know, Pat has talked about street vacation, and all those issues have to be dealt with under a separate process. Okay, so tonight we're not making any decisions on those other things. We're only making a decision on whether you agree with me that the Delray project shouldn't be on the TIP. And we also go through a technical exercise on just a simple needs basis. And really, the collectors are working very, very well in Stevenson. The intersections we analyzed are level service A, and we have 1B, and those are just like school grades, similar. We grade the roads and the intersections the same way. And A and B are, you know, are great levels of service. Typically, most cities have a level of service D standard, and we're at A and B. And you know, what's also interesting is when we look at the capacity of the roadway, we did daily traffic counts on those roads, and they're considered low volume roads. One of the references, national references we use is called AASHTO. And it suggests, it says that basically low volume road is 2,000 vehicles per day or lower. And you have one road, Vancouver Avenue, that barely goes over 2,000. And so all your roads have very low volumes, have a lot of potential for carrying more traffic. And so there really isn't a need to develop another road to help alleviate congestion on those roads because they're already operating very well. And so we look at it from a needs perspective, we look at it from a congestion perspective, safety. There's only 2 accidents in that study area in five and a half years. And so we're not seeing any accident issues. And so we really couldn't see the demand for the road from a public perspective. And really the only thing that we could identify is that the only issue with the land in the study area is private access. Well, that should be left up to the private landowners and private developers. And I think that's pretty clear in terms of that delineation. And we actually go through, there's a color figure called Figure 5, and we actually go through all of where we think the future accesses are going, or we did the research with the landowners, and these are where the accesses are. And what you find is there is a little bit of horse trading, and it's interesting how some of them develop, but you know, you can see that every lot here has their own access. Okay, now if that's going to change, again, that's between the 2 property owners, 3 property owners to negotiate. That's not really for the city to get involved in those politics, because you know it's only when one of these lots wants to develop or subdivide, then the city regulations need to be followed. At that time, the city engineer, city planner can go and look and see, okay, what are our road standards? What type of additional access are we requiring through our regulations? And it'll be determined at that time what they are. And it's the private developer and the landowner that will pay for that, not the city. And so that's kind of what our point is just really, this needs to stay, in our opinion, a private landowner issue. And the city will only be involved in it when there's basically a permit that needs to be pulled, or a project that needs to be approved that's a development, that's a subdivision, or maybe even an apartment project. And so at that time, all this will be looked at properly with the planner, city planner, and the city engineer. So I don't think the city is missing out on anything. As a matter of fact, I think the city's, if you choose to take that project out of the TIP, I think what it is doing is protecting the city from spending dollars that it's questionable whether there's enough public benefit. So that's pretty much my summary. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to answer them.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm wondering what impression you're under in terms of why this road landed on the TIF list in the first place.
Well,
Because some of
go
your comments lead me to believe that maybe you don't understand how that happened or why it's there.
well, it's not so much that, is that there's a lot of history. And I'm not sure, my opinion is this, is there's a lot of history in terms of what happened over a long period of time. And I just don't think it's so much relevant to the decision tonight. Because there's really more of a higher level of responsibility and a look in terms of whether the city should be looking to, whether it's something that's going to happen now or something 5 or 6 years from now, whether the city should be spending money on it or not. Because, you know, the whole thing is again, it's like, do you want to get involved in something that is really, is something that's somebody else's business until it's your business? You know, because the whole thing is there's a lot of history, there's a lot of changes and ideas. And one of the things simply is that some of the property owners have had a change of heart in terms of what they want to do with their land. Initially, one property owner wanted to do a short plan. That's no longer in their plan. And so that's really simplifies it to the issue that they just simply want access for the properties. And so it simplifies it a lot, where we're not talking about a public road, we're not talking about a development. It's just simply landowners that are getting together and negotiating, you know, how they might create easements or how they might create alternative accesses for them. And when it becomes an issue where they need an approval from the city, they'll go and get it. You know, but so, you know, the whole thing is there's just a lot of detail from the past, and a lot has changed in terms of the landowner's mindset, and there's more cooperation today, and there's not this big ambitious plans that they really need the city to step in on. And so we're trying to simplify this rather than kind of go through all the details.
So when you were putting this together, did you consult with the school district?
Yes, we talked to the school district, and, you know, basically the school district, you know, their position is basically that either way, either outcome, they're not going to get involved, you know. So, because the biggest thing for the school district is really dollars. And I think, you know, reading in between the lines, their big issue is their accesses are working fine, okay? And 2 is they don't want to be in a position where they're asked to pay for something if they, and so because they have limited funds, a lot of demands, and so this is not really on their radar.
So speaking of the school's limited funds, if Delray were to be developed, then the school buses, which are, I don't know, 10 or 15 a day, 2 trips a day,
Mm-hmm.
they would be able to cut through Delray instead of coming all the way down and back up,
Mm-hmm.
saving each bus probably half a mile of travel a day, multiply that by 10 or 12 or 15 buses.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, buses don't make the best fuel economy in the world. So it seems that there would be a savings to the school if that road were developed. Am I incorrect on that?
Well, I think one of the things you have to look at is as proposed, we would not suggest that Delray be developed with 9-foot lanes if school buses were considered on there. And the other thing is that the school district is not asking for this improvement.
But they would benefit if they could go through there. They clearly
they may, but you know, there's one thing that was very clear in my conversation with the transportation director was that, you know, either way, whatever outcome happened tonight, there's not enough interest for them to be here. There's not enough interest to say, yeah, we have to have this project. And as a matter of fact, I asked her the question, what if the city council decided to remove it? Would you have an issue with it? She said no. So they're really taking a neutral stance on this.
And you mentioned that cities shouldn't build roads. And I think that you're probably correct in the subdivisions that occur, that the developer builds those roads. However, there are many cases where municipalities do build roads in order to encourage development in particular locations. Is that somehow not relevant to this case?
Well, I think you have to look at the classification. You know, when we look at what larger cities that build roads all the time, they're on arterials, they're on collectors. They're not on local roads. Matter of fact, one of the big things about, like say, the city of Vancouver or Clark County, there's something called traffic impact fee credits. Okay, and a big developer can get credits only if they build part of the public infrastructure on their arterials and collectors. What they build on the local side, they get no credit for. And in addition to that, it's even more stringent than that. It has to be on an arterial or a collector, and it has to be in a tip. And then if it's something that they're going to build instead of the public, when the public already planned to build it, then they will get a credit for it. But you know, they're not in the business of developing a local road.
Okay, and I have one more thing to point out. I'm going to look this over thoroughly.
Mhm.
Thank you all for doing this. But I have to point out that on the very first page, in a just quick glance, like 3-second glance, I found an error.
Mhm.
First page, 3 seconds, I found an error. So that creates in me a sense of I need to check it in a little. I should verify.
Mhm. Well, you know, the one thing that I would do is I would ask the public benefit question to your attorney. Because that's a big issue, and that should be interpreted by counsel. Because that is that's really a legal question.
Well, the error is not a legal question, it's a factual question.
Yeah. But that's the one thing I would do is go and talk to your counsel on that particular issue, because I think that is probably the biggest issue that we found.
Which issue are you referring to?
Is the local street issue
Got it.
and the classification of that.
In the evolution of cities, most streets, especially in older parts of town, start as local streets, and then throughout time, they develop traffic patterns and so forth, and they grow and change. All right, so just because something is currently a local street doesn't mean it will always be a local street, especially as our population grows. So planning for the future, is that considered in this document, or is it strictly current conditions?
Well, it reacts to what's being proposed to be built, and that's the 9-foot lanes.
Okay, so therefore it is current conditions, no future planning, I guess you could say.
Well, I wouldn't characterize it that way because, you know, the planning document did mention the number of lots. We mentioned the extra capacity on all the existing collectors. And so, you know, from our traffic perspective, you know, even looking at down the future, this is still a local issue, you know, and it's still a local road issue, still an access issue, and whoever develops is still going to have the burden of proving to the city that they meet the city standards.
Of course.
So, you know, in our opinion, the city doesn't lose anything here because they still have the issue of the street vacation that is going to go through city council. They still have, and related to that is they still have that road agreement that has to be rescinded, you know, and if it's not rescinded, then then that stops the process. So the city has a tremendous, and then they have any issues, then they still have development standards at time of development. So the city still has many avenues and many processes that still have to be done before anything else can be done with Delray. So just because if you grant a request to remove Delray, there's still a lot more work. There's still a lot more proof that Pat and the neighbors have to bring to the city council before anything gets done. And so, any one of those could basically stop the street vacation. So that's the ultimate goal of our group. But the whole thing is that's city council decision. That's not our decision. And also the road agreement has to be looked at, and renegotiation of from a right of way to easements have to be done. And so there's a lot of work, and the city is in the driver's seat making all those decisions, whether they like it or whether they agree with the language or not. And so there's a lot of process left beyond just the tip. So I guess I say that and trying to give you a reassurance that you have a lot of authority and a lot of review left before anything gets done with the right of way.
So as we go through this document on our own time, as questions come up or if I need clarifications, should I direct that to you or to the group?
Sure, you can direct that to me.
Are your contact information on the document?
Yeah, it is, but I'll give you my business card. So yeah, I'd be happy to go ahead and answer any questions.
Thank you.
Actually, is there any more public comment?
Okay. Well, if you have any more questions, I'm available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if there is no further comment, we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing at it's like 6:34. All right, any other discussion?
My understanding is that this project is on the tip because we were talking about wanting to be able to access school dollars. We wanted to be able to access grant money that might be available for us to improve safer routes to school. Is that
To improve what?
to improve to improve access to the school through the grants that are sometimes available under a program called Safer Routes to School.
Okay.
Is that correct? Yeah. So there are a lot of things on this, on the transportation improvement plan that are here that may or may not ever get funded. They're on here because if the opportunity for that grant arises, we're sort of saying, we're looking out in the future, hey, we'd like to be able to potentially access this future pot of money that may or may not become available. And so we're sort of using it as a way to hedge our bets, right? If Safer Routes to School funding becomes available, hey, we've got this project that could utilize that. Now we're ready to go. So because of that, I think Paul's questions about the school and Mr. Lee's comments about the school are particularly germane because that's the whole reason this project ended up here in the first place, was to try to access those future dollars. So when I think about it, I think about, okay, yeah, I hear that the neighborhood, however many people are in that neighborhood, are not interested in that. But I try to put, well, what might the school be interested in at a sort of on the other side, right? I think it's true that the school hasn't weighed in on this issue. They're not here tonight. They haven't said anything about it. And so that sort of makes me go, is that the right decision to make? So I don't know. That's just, I wanted to make, I'm sort of talking. I'm processing as I talk to make sure that that was the reason it ended up on here in the first place.
So question then, Amy,
Yeah.
Since I'm the new guy on the block, the grant that you're talking about, is that a matching grant or is that just, here's the money, go do it type of thing, or it's not gonna cost any money for our taxpayers?
I think they're all different. We
They're
don't know
matching
what-
funds that are
Matching
required. I
funds.
don't know,
So on
off
a
the top of my head what the,
So on a
Percentages.
$400,000 project that we've got on this, we're looking at coming up with 200,000 out of,
that'd be the worst case. Do you recall
Worst
what it
case
was?
scenario.
I think it's
80/20s typically.
pardon?
80% federal through the state, 20% local.
Okay. My concern is using the taxpayer dollars to pay for something that a developer should be taking care of. I look up at Angel Heights. Did the city pay for putting those roads in? No, the developer paid for that.
Those were new roads in a new neighborhood, though. This would be a new road in an existing neighborhood. It's kind of a different formula.
Well, yes and no, because the roads have been there since 1912. Is that correct? Is that what I read?
It was platted
All right.
in 12. I believe.
21, I was,
21.
from what I saw.
What's that?
100+ years.
Yeah. So, it's like no name road.
Well, I think part of the challenge that we have with some of the areas are, yes, the design standards have changed from when the original plat took
Yes.
place. And so I think to Paul's point, the reason why we were able to make the developer do a lot of those improvements was because they wanted to do the subdivision, and those are the requirements of the
Okay.
subdivision.
So Ben, then if a developer comes in and says, okay, this is what I want to do what do I need to do to Del Rey Avenue? Okay. At that point, we can say it has to be this wide. You have to put this type of infrastructure in. This is all of the things that need to be done in order for you to do your development, correct?
Not totally correct.
Okay,
Our current engineering standards, as I understand them, and I don't implement them, so that the city engineer would be better suited to that. But as I understand them, is we make those requirements of the new roads. We don't have any process to require frontage improvements for construction of a single home on a road. And so those end up being very piecemeal decisions about what happens. And so when we're reviewing public road improvements, it's at the property land division stage. It's not at the land development stage, or
Okay.
building stage.
so a question then, is there a standard in place to have a driveway, for lack of a better term, with multiple dwellings accessing that driveway?
There's a shared driveway
Yes.
standard of 2 dwellings,
2 lots now,
2
2 lots.
dwell,
We changed it to lots.
2 lots, 2 lots.
Okay. And I know that Mr. Ray had, is that correct? Did, pardon?
Who's Mr. Red?
Not Mr. Ray,
Nice. Rick May.
May, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Dave.
I know well, I had the last 2 letters right. And it rhymed.
Those are good.
I know that he initially requested that it be put onto the tip. Is that correct? Okay. And at the last meeting, he requested that it be taken off. My concern is that we have all of the property owners saying, we don't want this. The other concern I have, though, is once they develop those properties, what is that impact going to be on that particular thoroughfare, if you call it, for lack of a better term? And how do we mitigate the impact of that. So I've got kind of a quandary about it. I understand where Mr. Lee and they're coming from. But I also have the concern about, okay, well, if we vacate this thing, or if we take this off the tip, then we have to go through these other processes.
So those are two separate issues.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
this is only
so
taking
do we need to have it on the tip in order to be able to still address all of those issues?
No.
See what I'm saying?
No, we don't.
The
The only reason, from my perspective, the only reason it's on the tip is to be able to access a particular pot of money.
Yeah.
If we no longer care about accessing that pot of money, it can come off the tip.
Well, it is currently a public right of way, a trail.
Yes.
If there's a second grader that lives on this part of town that walks to school, clearly that's the shortcut, the most pleasant walk to school. However, under current conditions, there are certain hazards that exist on that little trail. There's no doubt that these hazards exist. And I wouldn't send my second grader down that by himself any time of day. I just wouldn't. And under current conditions.
Sure.
In fact, I won't go down now myself. Well, I might if I had a can of bear spray, but that'd be about it. It's just not a safe place to be, in my opinion. And if it's going to stay in the public ownership, I think it should stay on the tip so that we can access money in the future if money comes up. However, if it's going to be vacated, that's a whole different subject, and we would address that when that comes up. Currently, we're only talking about whether it stays on the transportation improvement plan.
Yes.
And my feeling is it should stay primarily for school access for kids that live on this side of town and to improve bus transportation to and from the school.
Okay, question then. How often do we review the tip?
Every year.
Annually? So if we take it off now, I'm just looking at the economics of the country right now. I don't see a whole lot of grants coming forward to be able to do this within the next year. Can we put it back on the tip next year? If we hear that something might be coming down the pipe in a couple of years, can we put it back on the
It's
tip?
better to,
Yeah.
somebody more qualified than me can answer. that.
Yeah,
Or
I'll
give
push
my
back
2
on that.
cents.
a little bit.
Okay.
There are, on the federal level, there's an infrastructure plan that's being discussed and
Yes.
batted back and forth, as
Yep.
we know.
Yep.
If that does get passed in whatever form it ends up in, then perhaps there will be money available then. Right. Currently, there's not.
Yeah.
And then your other point on that,
Taking it off.
taking it off. If we take it off and then just plan to put it back on later, if something
Or-
happens to come on, that does us no good to take it off. I mean, why bother?
Well, right now we've got a date of, what, 27? Is that what was?
Those dates don't actually correlate to anything. We've got a project that's been on here since 1998. I mean,
Yeah.
just because it's on the tip, just so people know, just because a road is on this list does not mean that anything is actually for sure going to happen,
Ever.
ever.
And it could have been earlier than 98. I just stopped looking.
I mean, and as for Mr. Lee's comment that we don't get involved in any local streets, I mean, Lakeview Street is on here. That's a local street. It's been on here for, since, according to this, since 2008.
Mhm.
So I understand and I feel and I hear and I read, hopefully at some point, this packet, a lot of consternation about this road being on the tip. But all it really means is that we're setting ourselves up to access a potential future pot of money. Doesn't actually mean something is happening. If that pot of money becomes available, then yes, we need to have a conversation about something actually happening, and that becomes much more likely.
And then you enter into a whole nother series of public hearings and all of that.
Absolutely.
That's right.
you might be able to take one step farther back. And so the idea of bringing public funds to that, whether that's federal grant funds or city funds, we're being advised by Mr. Lee that his clients are the ones who are to bear the cost of that. So when it was brought forward as a project, the narrative was that we want to reduce the cost of development. It's just too expensive to develop and it drives up costs. And so the city was willing to budget or use this as a budgetary tool to help drive down the cost of development while creating those improvements. We're being told not to do that, to leave that completely in private hands. I don't know if you've advised the clients of that, but you're being told, don't worry about it, they'll pay for it.
So, yeah, so don't worry about the 400,000.
And so whether that's federal money or city money.
So
But if those plans don't match up with what the city had in mind, then this study was not put together to take a look at the city side of what we might be doing. It was more to make sure that their needs were addressed. So, yeah, I want to make sure that you guys were keeping in mind that we are talking about private and whether the city's needs for our ideas for future development there were being addressed in this plan and public, what you call it, public benefit.
Right.
But again, like, I don't see the school district here. They've had ample opportunity.
And what is the city's need to develop Delray?
I
If I
don't,
could just interject.
That's what my question, my main question is, why do I go to people and say, we're gonna use $400,000 of your guys' tax money to put this street in? And this is why.
well,
improved access to schools.
that's the bottom
Well,
line.
but then if you think about it too, can you imagine a bus turning on, coming up Kanaka Creek and having to make a left-hand turn to go into that? They wouldn't do that. They would
Well,
take,
they come down Connecticut Creek and make a right-hand turn from the bus bar. That's
okay,
the route they take.
and Paul, you know how heavy that traffic is
Absolutely.
coming down there at school time. And what kind of a backlog that will make. You know what the fiasco is down here on Homeward.
Yeah.
I
you're
mean,
right, yeah,
I mean,
it
you
might-
know, that just so that they can make a right-hand turn there and save, 200 or 300 yards of travel.
That's 200 or 300 yards twice a day for 10 buses. That adds up.
Well,
Ken.
okay.
Okay, and
Anyway.
I'd like to point out there are currently 4 lots, is that correct, on that strip? So if the development of that road fell into private hands, that would be about $100,000 each. Is that, am I wrong on that?
There's a slight difference between the tax lots that are
Mhm.
on here versus the platted lots
Okay.
that exist.
There could be more
There's
platted
additional-
lots.
There's
Like, for
additional
example,
platted lots
yeah,
on that.
Okay, so, but it still be a sizable amount for each individual.
I don't think any property owners would ever logically build what you're proposing they build, so that's the answer to that.
Well, you're probably right, but,
Okay, I accept that, what
like-
you just said.
pardon me?
I appreciate what you just said, because I think I agree with you, I probably am right.
Yeah, the lot 6 on this looks landlocked to me as it is. So if they wanted to develop something, they'd have to
I
change.
think all these owners are here.
Public comment is closed. You guys had your chance, so I have to
He
be
asked me a
strict with my
question.
rules. So, go ahead, Paul.
If the owner of lot 6 on this were to want to develop, that would be quite expensive. And for that person. And if that's something if that lot owner is willing to fork $400,000 in today's dollars, that would be on them, right?
Well, lot 6 currently looks like it's got access out to Connecticut Creek.
Isn't there a guardrail there? Blocking it?
Lot 6,
I think there is.
going right, no,
Yeah, I think.
right here?
Yeah.
This road
Yeah,
coming right
there.
out here,
No, I think,
Connecticut Creek?
yeah, there's a guardrail right here. Blocking one, if you walk down there.
So one question I have to kind of just get it back to the tip in general is, do we want to change the process or criteria for items that are on the tip? For example, a couple of these items just came on from public comment and public request, and then yes, we can access funds for Safe Routes to School for that project. I mean, that's literally the conversation that took place during a public hearing. And no additional analysis was done by the city for all of these for the most part. And so do we want to, again, take a step back and take a broader view as far as what are the criteria for items that are on the tip? Again, we don't have to answer that question this year, but just kind of as an ongoing process for next year. I mean, we are in the middle of a transportation study that may help inform some of these and clarify. And so we can have, you know, a tip, which might be the funding route, but then also an adopted street plan that's going to be wrapped into our comprehensive capital improvement program. And so kind of looking at these individual streets at that point in time, when we're looking at that, similar to we do our water and our sewer plan. We've been treating this as that, but do we want to separate it and make this a more robust process as far as how things get on this tip?
I think that's a really good question. I mean, I mean, I only know from being on council for a long period of time that this is really just used for budgetary purposes and not much else.
Yeah, and on
For
this,
future planning.
this list,
Not
if I
really.
were, you know, if I were picking my top 10, 15, 20, whatever projects, Delray would not be on my short list at all. That doesn't mean that we need to drop it, because if funding does come available, I would like to be able to jump on that straight away.
Okay, so you posed a question about how to potentially change the way the tip is presented moving forward.
Mhm.
We also have the discussion of keep the Delray project on the tip or not. But then we also have to decide whether to approve the tip. So try and
Try and narrow it down.
So I think that what we're talking about as part of the public hearing is approving the transportation improvement plan. So the sticking point is whether that plan includes the Delray project or not. What I'm unclear on is if we take a straw poll on keep it or not, or how do we?
No, I think someone makes a motion either to approve the tip as presented or approve it with Delray, and that's how.
Well, and I still haven't heard an answer to my question about why, other than that
That's the
issue,
reason.
is that the
That's the
only
only
reason
reason.
that we got it on there?
Yeah.
And I pulled the minutes from the meeting, and I believe that was the conversation of adding it to the tip, was if you add it to the tip, we can access the Safe Routes to School funding.
So we kind of went, why wouldn't we want that?
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Throw that on the list.
There's another one that goes from the Roselawn neighborhood to the school that is it's privately owned currently. But you know, when I walk by, I go, man, that needs to be a sidewalk right there so kids can walk to school. But it's in private hands, and it is what it is. This one, however, is in public hands, and it would be a great route for school. Whether it be a safe path sidewalk or whether it be a full road, I think I would like to keep it on there. So motion to approve the transportation improvement plan as presented.
I'm going to second it just to keep options open.
First and second, any further comment, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay, pass, okay. Did Johanna get it? So we have Paul and Amy with an aye and Dave with a nay.
And I don't believe that needs a majority, so I think we're good to go.
Okay. You have a sewer plant update for us?
I do have a sewer plant update for you. So we recently got in some UV lights for our UV channel to help keep that up and running until we get our new UV channel, which will be with the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. And everything seems to be going just ducky, knock on wood. So if you look at the impact or at the loading that's been at the plant, just since I guess the fall of 2019, it's dramatically down from 2018. And so our partners have been working really hard and diligently to make sure that their BOD levels and their BOD effluent is under the level so that our plant can run and maintain capacity, which helps with a lot of things, including our biosolids as well. And so we're still waiting to hear back from our hauling company, Tribeca, on a quote for additional hauling, again, with potential reduction of use of the Hood River plant. They would have to do 2 trips in a week, which would need some jockeying around of their other customers and other deliveries. And so
Where do they haul to?
3 Rivers, so Kelso, Longview.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they wouldn't be able to get the 3 trips in a day that we get just by going to the river. So, and then working on the funding side of things, there are a couple of questions that I would like to have council provide guidance on. And it's over what kind of payments or payment plan or financing package does council want? One of the questions, is it just overall total payments keep low, keep the annual payment low, keep the interest low?
Overall total cost.
Overall total cost.
Well, currently interest rates are artificially low and they're only going to go up.
The biggest thing right now is so USDA. Again, right now I'm using numbers. I don't know what kind of a grant package we would get with USDA, but that's a higher interest rate and it's over 40 years. Well, in about 20 years, we're going to need to do another clarifier. So whatever payment we have with that, we would still be making payments on our old wastewater treatment plant at that point in time, while we finance or try to make payments on a new funding or a new upgrade to that plant. Department of Ecology, we have a loan package for 1.5% over 30 years. So it's a lower interest rate. It's a shorter period of time. So those payments are going to be slightly higher, but we're paying it off sooner. And it comes with roughly $1 million in grant. And then I'm looking at I talked with the Senator Cantwell's, Senator Patty Murray's representative, and he said that we would have roughly a 25% chance at getting the 2.5 million appropriations request that we asked for. The grant package through DOE, the grant portion does not fall, it's not federal funds, it's state funds, so it wouldn't be a match, and so we would be able to use a larger portion of that $2.5 million on the plant. If we went with USDA, any grant would be absorbed by whatever USDA would give us. So those are kind of the various pathways that I'm trying to navigate through to determine what the best probability is for the plant. And just, again,
my preference, I hate paying interest. It just kills me to pay interest.
Here, bro.
And if we can get a decent interest rate that's locked in, it's not variable. I hate variable interest too. Here's my politically incorrect side. And the shorter that we can do that, I think the better off the city's going to be.
That's the lowest total cost.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah, so lowest total cost, taking all factors into consideration, such as interest rates.
Yeah.
The monthly payment or the yearly payment may be higher, but in the long term, we're paying out less tax dollars.
It's
You
a
know.
better use of our dollars.
That's absolutely.
I think we agree.
And then the other, I also threw in a
Good.
private
Give us an
investor
easy
fund.
one
Yes, I know.
after
Well,
that
thank you,
heartache.
thank you, thank you. Well, I mean, because there's a different answer. If your focus is solely on rates, then USDA is the way to go. But if it's on the overall total cost and the overall health of everything in the long run, from my perspective, then yes, I think the DOE is the better route.
If the city can afford that higher payment, then I think that that's the route we need to
Well,
take.
and the difference would be we wouldn't put aside as much in reserves using the DOE that we would for USDA, but we would have 10 years sooner to start putting money aside.
Yes.
And not saying we won't put money aside, but we are working on getting the predictor model up and running to determine what level of service we want to keep and then how much funds that means setting aside to make sure that we have some funds so we're not financing the whole thing the next time.
Yes, yes.
So, anyway, okay. Thank you for that. That helps a lot. And like I said, I have the private side in here as well. So if we didn't qualify for either of those other two, there's a tool to get, again, shorter shorter payment time period. I think the way that they had it would be 22 years, but you're paying roughly 2.5% interest throughout. So overall, the interest payment is higher, but also your annual payment is also higher. So.
Thanks for all this analysis. It's really
Yeah,
helpful.
right.
Anders did really great with the charts.
Yeah. Nice.
Teamwork.
So-
Great work.
The only, I could remember that Nick, his eyes would glisten. He would get excited, and I almost see that in you.
Well, I try to hold it back. and I try to just keep it at.
He's got a fever.
Wow.
Could I, when there's time, I would like to request that we have just a very brief conversation about the last matter. When we have time on the agenda, about the tip, about the way that just went.
Okay. Now's as good a time as any.
Okay. What I'm wondering is if there's any way to be clearer in terms of like communicating that just because a project is on the tip doesn't mean that the city is planning on developing it right now. Because I think that fear, that concern, valid from people is what caused a lot of consternation.
I would agree.
And so, and there are a lot of people who left feeling really disheartened about the way city government works right now, because they, I'm sure, feel like we didn't really hear them. And so I wonder if there's any way we can, I don't know, sort of assure people that. Like,
There is a process that
Yeah.
protects them.
Yeah, and that just because we left it on the tip doesn't mean that anything is happening anytime soon. So I don't know if there's like something that can be added to the tip, or if there's something
So
that can be added to the
was some.
website, or how to deal with that.
The model that we use for future transportation planning is just broken. And you only use the tip. And instead of using that as a real budgeting tool to say that this is where your tax dollars are going to go over the next 6 years, we use it as this menu of options to justify a future grant. And an alternative to that would be something more like the sewer plan, where you're identifying all your transportation needs. You're selecting a few of those needs to actually fund over the next 6 years.
As opposed to leaving a wide open type of plan like what the TIP has right now.
And so at the staff level, administrative level, we want to fix what's broken. And so this transportation analysis that we're doing, the traffic analysis that we're doing, is one of the first steps to that, to bring data to the issue. And then we can start talking about the policies that might be necessary, like Liana said, about what justifies something going on the tip. Is it transportation volume? Is it condition of roadway? Is it adjacent owners' willingness to contribute to a project? You don't have any of that framework right now to view things through,
Mhm.
and that's a problem. And so, same as you're noting here, that, oh goodness, my neighborhood is really going to change right away. That can be interpreted. You use that to placate other members of the public who say, I want you to improve my road. And all right, we'll throw it on the tip. And then you never intend to do anything. It's just placation. So
Yeah.
all of that is broken, and
We need to fix it.
we know that need is there, and we're taking steps to make that possible.
Okay.
Well, and it's
So-
an interesting conundrum because there's been other TIP meetings where it's, how come you haven't done this yet?
Right, right.
I've seen
Yeah,
no
why is
movement
it,
on
why
this
is it
thing.
back at 1998? Yeah.
Right, well, and we're
Yeah.
giving them the same answer, right? Which is to Ben and
Just because it's on
Liana's
here doesn't
point,
mean it's
because
gonna happen.
because it's a
And you're right,
broken.
that is such a,
So, okay,
a
so
lame answer.
so what I'm hearing is we have an intention to get through the transportation study, thank you. And then to look at how we put things on the tip and maybe add an additional tool.
How to justify putting things onto the.
What
tip.
goes on and what
Yes.
comes off, and then specifically how we fund, right? Which is the overlay that you were talking about.
Yeah, and there, it kind of is all wrapped into the CIP, the capital improvement program that we're working on.
Okay.
And that's where we're gonna do a lot of the engagement as well on the process. I mean, Ben put together a really good slide deck of just doing Levens. I mean, it's there's a lot of things that need to happen there. Surprisingly so, for a street that's in our downtown. And so we're using that as the tool to get that community input so that when it does come time for that grant, we've already pre-done that.
Yeah.
And in the tip, it does state that we will not engage or even apply for any projects until we've engaged the community on
Yeah,
them.
that's nice.
So there is that caveat, which hadn't been there before.
Okay, so we have a general plan, but the public isn't aware of that general plan. And now all these people were here and left extremely disappointed that they didn't really get what they wanted, right?
Mhm.
So how can we communicate to them that something different is happening?
Oh, I'm sure there's gonna be some communication.
And none of it's gonna be good.
Well, I think, and
Send
even
them the
though, even though I voted
Send us
nay
a
on
link to
it,
the recording of this.
Yeah.
even
Put
though I
them in it.
voted nay, I understand why, okay? And it's my job to, as a council member, I would assume, as when I'm asked about that, to explain to them why, and explain to them that this isn't locked in stone. You know, this thing may be on the tip for the next 20 years. I mean, look at some of the other ones. So and if the financing becomes available, then we have that available. So
But the reality, I don't want to take up more time here, but the reality is that actually isn't the correct answer, because what we're talking about doing now is changing the whole way that we're doing the tip.
correct.
So
But
starting
But right now,
right now until next year, or whenever we get to that, like next year will be a very different process based, and maybe that's what we say. Next year will be a very different process based on how this process went and us recognizing that it doesn't really work.
I just don't want people to accuse us of kicking the can down the road.
Well,
Well,
there's
next
always
year
that, but
or
at least we
next
can
year
learn
or
from,
whatever. Yes, yes.
what's happening.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. Do we have a list of people from this neighborhood?
Yes.
Can we send them?
And I can tell them what time.
Yeah.
Can you
let's do
define
that.
we in
Yes,
this case?
yes.
Who is we?
And
in
the
this
city
Yeah.
send them a notification that, after the vote was taken, we went back and discussed further this issue and made some decisions that affect future tip planning that they may be interested in learning about.
And I think as part of the whole transportation study process, we can look at what do other cities do for the tip? How do they leverage
Yeah.
that tip and possibly incorporate the process for doing it prior to June of next year or prior to
And
May
maybe-
of next
And
year.
maybe what is
So
the
we know-
process to add things and also to take things off the tip,
Right, yeah.
if they have something in place.
Well, hopefully the process of adding is gonna be way more robust, so that we don't
Right.
find ourselves in this situation. again.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I would think that we might want to even consider doing like a blank slate, like
Yeah.
just saying, we're gonna start all over. And so even though that road is, even though Del Rey is on that list right now, it may not be on there next year because we're gonna redo our whole process,
I think
right?
that's a great idea.
Because of the things that we're gonna put in place.
That would require,
Exactly.
it would require a
It's a
council
lot of work.
workshop.
Mhm,
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
mhm.
So if staff is up for that, because that's a lot of work.
Well, especially if staff comes and says, it's broken, help us
Well,
fix it.
that's what we're trying to do, help us fix it. We know
Yeah,
it's
staff-
obviously
Okay.
not working.
All right.
And
So-
we've communicated that message before, that the traffic
I know.
study that we're
I know.
doing is leading to something else. So we've communicated it. I'm not sure how well that has been heard, but
Yeah.
we'll continue to communicate
Yeah.
it and make that a well-known part of the
And so
process.
do we have a timeline on that?
We do have a timeline. There's a Gantt chart that's on my desk, but I have no idea.
What it is.
exactly
Okay.
No, October.
Okay. So if that's done in October, that gives us November, December, January, February, March, maybe?
Well, no, so our October is for the final report. We're gonna do engagement prior to that final report.
Okay, so this will be
well,
wrapped up
so-
in that.
yeah.
I'm just thinking like before next June, how much time do we have to get something new in place?
And
Can the public make a suggestion?
Go for it.
So you've got pond study over there, and I haven't looked at it. I wasn't involved in it until today's the first day I looked at it. And then you've got this detailed study that's going to come in here. Why don't you just let them know is that you're going to look at all these studies, you're going to analyze it and use the best science that comes out of these studies, and then you're going to go back to the tip at that particular period of time, and make a decision.
Well, and we did let our consultant know that they were doing this study and provided the contact as well. So our consultant has that information of what this study
I'm
is.
just telling you,
so-
because I live in this neighborhood, I
Right.
know these
Mhm.
people,
Yeah.
and if you send something out to them saying, we heard you, we're gonna read the Han report, we're gonna look at this other report, and then we're gonna revisit this issue.
Mhm.
They'll feel heard.
And we told the consultant we provided the contact info, we
Yeah.
said, work with them, ensure that it's a collaborative approach.
Yeah.
Everything right now is just data points, so
Mhm.
all of that'll go in, and it'll supplement the overall traffic study that's produced, so.
Okay.
That's an intended part of the process.
Good.
That we've laid out. One of the things that we've talked about too with them is that part of their recommendations are going to be that this whole thing is a work in progress. And so they'll come with some recommendations about conclusions. They'll also come with some recommendations about how to get to the next conclusion, to get to the next set of conclusions. So
The traffic
it'll
study folks,
unfold.
the people doing that research, okay, great.
Huge process.
Yeah, but that's good.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to have brought us back on the agenda, but it just was feeling like my heart was just,
Well, especially when you were the swing. So-
well, I know, there's a lot of pressure, and the
Yeah.
reason I voted the way I did is still valid, and
There's
so
still
is the
waiting
rest
out
of
there
this.
for you, but
Yeah.
When are we talking about closing?
I've had more dangerous crowds waiting for me out
So,
there.
of course, yeah.
yeah, down,
Do you want me
down.
to bring it now?
Yeah, I think it warrant, because it's even in this book that it's a situation. So
Okay,
let's put it as a situation
So-
update.
situation update.
Situation update.
Yeah, I leave it on my desk. I think it is. There is a bit of an issue with a plant, that produces chlorine gas.
I heard.
And there, I believe it was a transformer that went down. It's been down for 2 weeks already. We were notified on Monday. They provided us with a force majeure notification meaning that they prioritize water and wastewater utilities over anything for chlorine distribution.
Are you talking about our water treatment?
I'm talking about our
plants?
water treatment plant chlorine supply.
Okay.
Yes, and so we don't use chlorine for our wastewater process.
Some do, but if you
some
see any
do.
reports prioritizing wastewater, we're not one of those.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And so ever since we received that, the question is, okay, well, what do we need to do to make sure that our supply lasts as long as possible until it's figured out? There was a meeting with at the state level regarding this issue earlier today. And I believe the plan was they should be able to at least get the new transformer and all the parts and everything, working with the PUD installed, and that part up and running by next week sometime. And so if all goes well, they should be up and running in the next week or two. Yeah. Yeah. And so if that's the plan, I mean, I'm sure they're going to be catching up with some production, but we're still fine. One of the things that we've done is we've asked our large irrigators to hold back on irrigating if they can. We've stopped irrigating our downtown flower bed, so if you see things drying out, that's why. We do
The Dallas
have
pool has been closed.
Yeah, the Dallas pool has been closed. Well, it's also in conjunction with, I believe it was in Louisiana last year when the fire plant of a chlorine pellets, when that burned down, that also disrupted the chlorine supply as well. So it's just kind of compounding that issue. And worse comes to worse, which would take us a while. We would have to do a boil water ordinance. But right now we're taking steps to conserve what we have.
Wouldn't we say stop all outdoor watering first?
We would. So there are additional steps that we can take. Yes. We're not quite there yet. Like I said, we'll see how next week goes. But we're okay for now.
So when I was getting the briefing on this yesterday, completely gobsmacked that the infrastructure, that the mechanism for this is so fragile that now, admittedly, it's 2 plants, but out of how many and why is it unbelievable? It's unbelievable. It's hard to believe, but apparently chlorine has a shelf life, so you can't just make it and plan for the worst. Just like we can't buy a ton of it and plan for the worst either, because then now you've put money on a shelf and watched it go away. So the things that can be done are already being done or are in process. So they're working on alternating back and forth with the well. Anybody that uses chlorinated water from the treatment plant, we're taking a hard look at that, including like asking people to take a second look at watering, especially the big irrigation customers. There was supposed to be a burn to learn this weekend, and all of our hydrants are on the treatment plant, water plant. So that was canceled. Unless you want to bring a tender full of water that you got someplace else, and the chief said thanks, but no. So
it's a question, I'm just thinking out of the box here, from all of the stuff that we used to do with the sheriff's office and all this contingency planning and everything. What would happen if you would take, say, water that's used for irrigation throughout the city and allow people to put a small well on their property to be able to specifically do irrigation for their gardens? Because there's a lot of people now that are gardening, darn good and well, they're going to scream if we say, you got to stop watering. Those kinds of things. And I know that we've got the aquifer that we got to try to protect and all that kind of stuff. And I understand all that. But it just seems that, we spend a lot of money chlorinating our water and treating our water to have people wash their cars and have people, water their lawns and things like that. And it would seem to me like if a person wanted to have the ability to put a small well on his property,
Cistern, basically.
Huh?
A cistern.
Yeah,
That's what you're talking
yeah,
Why
basically.
not use rainwater or capture?
Or
Right,
rainwater.
right.
or
So
satellite.
there's a couple things. So you can collect rainwater,
Mhm.
but as far as wells inside this, there's a couple of things that would contribute to that not working. One is spotty aquifers in the
Sure.
area. People have wells and they just dry up in August.
Yep, yep.
And so the other part is there's a water decision, is it Hearst, limiting the drilling of wells in specific areas, and it's related to water rights as well.
Mhm.
And so one of the challenges is in Washington State, there are more water rights than there is available water on paper. And so they're trying to make sure that we don't outrun the supply of water. And so it limits the ability for people to drill wells, especially if they have access to public water. Because the public water, all of the Washington State codes around water is around conservation. And so encouraging people to use water, even if it is for food supply, is not in line with what the policy.
And see, and here's my redneck, non-political side of, what right does the government have to tell me whether or not I can drill a well and pull water out of that? Because what makes them say that they own that water and I don't?
So
right.
Well, but the impact is the value to you versus the value to the entire city.
Mhm.
And so that's where the regulations come
The
into play.
aquifer that you're drawing from is
Sure.
greater
Right.
than
Yeah.
your acre or two that your house
Hey,
is.
but see, I'm putting the water back onto the land to allow it to go back down into the aquifer, whereas a lot of this water isn't getting done that way.
You know what?
Getting made to make beer and, other things.
Dave, drop by my house someday and I'll show you how I've done
Okay,
it. It wasn't easy.
but I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, I've lived in places where there was a serious drought and they asked us to do such things as not take showers, take a bath, and then
Mhm,
Yeah.
take the bath water and dump it out in your garden.
mhm.
Yeah, and there was, where I remember if you're odd and even days that you could if your address ended in an odd number, you could water on certain days and an even number on certain days.
Kind of like the old gas thing where
Yeah.
So from what we've seen so far, they hope to have the plant up and running by the 27th. What that's going to do to the supply chain is anybody's guess. But from what I heard, first transformer was replaced and the downstream equipment after that didn't jive.
Do you
So
feel,
there's two plants in the United States that do chlorine, is that correct?
Well, there's two that
No,
are,
there's two that are down.
and that's the part that's like, and that,
Both of them are
I
down?
think there's only 6 in the United States.
and
or
that's
something.
crippling apparently.
Right. And the other piece of this is chlorine's also used to make PVC.
And we might be working on putting some PVC in for a treatment plant upgrade pretty soon.
Better buy it now.
Mr. Mayor, do you think it's a good idea to prepare an emergency proclamation about washing cars and watering?
So we already have our ordinance
You already have
ready.
something
We already
ready
have
to
an
go?
ordinance for water curtailment, and so it would just take enactment of it. I don't know that we need to declare an emergency just yet.
But so if something does
But
go
we do
horribly
have- we have
wrong,
it.
we can get to it quickly.
Mhm.
Okay, that's important.
Okay, yeah, we moved that up. That was
Yeah.
further down, but we'll call it a situation for now.
Mhm.
All right.
Mhm.
So contract for the 2021 collection systems improvement project.
Yay! So yay, we're gonna go to construction.
Well, see, we've been wringing our
know.
hands over this project for 4 years now, and it's
Yeah.
finally happening.
Yeah.
It is super exciting.
So this, as you can see in the bid documents,
What page are you on right now?
145. I didn't realize how small it ended up being printed. Anyway, so the bid came in about $300,000 over what the engineer's estimate was. In talking, I was on the McEd call earlier today, and in Biggs, their project is $1 million over. So I don't know what their initial budget was, but, I mean, at
Like
least,
for just this portion of,
this is, yeah, so it's only it's $300,000 for just phase one of this project. We have 3 other lift stations that we're doing, and we can modify the design of those to make sure that we get what we need, and still maintain under the $5 million budget. So.
Your eyes are twinkling.
Crestline Construction, was the low bidder. And
we've worked with them before, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they did the.
Russell Street?
And then they did up here too.
And Carl was super happy
They
with them,
didn't
right?
do Russell.
No, that's right.
Oh.
They did Cascade and they did Jamaica Creek.
And was he happy with them and their work?
There were, it seems to me there were more go back and fix it's with Crestline than there was with the one that did Russell, wasn't there?
Sometimes it comes down to contractor management.
Right.
And I'm like,
Okay,
because I've been yelled at.
okay, all right,
I
Thank
think
you.
those are wise words.
okay.
Well, I would move to award the 2021 collection systems improvement project to Crestline Construction in the amount of $1,939,897.79.
may I also add and authorize the mayor to sign the.
And authorizes the mayor to sign whatever documents he needs to.
Thanks.
I'll second.
First and a second, any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we're getting ready for our audit, yay.
You're saying
Like, I
yeah,
know.
Martha.
A lot happier this year that we didn't do a financial system conversion in the middle of the year. But it will start on July 5th, 6th, is the Monday we get back. We're getting all the data. It will be remote again for the most part, just like it was last time. So we're scanning them all the documents again, since there have been a lot of issues and challenges with data lately and breaches, we have an agreement with the state auditor's office about data sharing, and that's what this is all about. Just making sure that
I'd move to approve the U.S. Treasury Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund Award Terms and Conditions Agreement as presented.
I'll second
Is that
that.
the right motion?
No.
Wait, no,
Okay.
Isn't it?
It's
No.
8B.
sorry.
The interagency data sharing agreement?
There you
Yeah,
go,
yep.
That was the right one,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Okay.
B,
Interagency data sharing agreement, city and.
8B.
Okay, because that's not what I heard, what I thought I heard you say. Okay,
Well, I'll second.
Wait a minute. Say the motion again, please.
To approve the U.S. Treasury.
So we are on the road.
Oh, sorry.
it's to approve the interagency data sharing agreement. Do you see that? Between
8B.
the city of Stevenson.
Oh, I'm
You're on C.
on the wrong one, sorry.
Reel it in, Dave.
Yeah.
Or how about this? Because I've done one at a time, Scott.
To approve the interagency data sharing agreement between the city of Stevenson and the Office of the Washington State Auditor as presented. See, I've already read the other one too, and I'm ready to approve that one too.
Okay, so,
I'll go ahead and second that one.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're knocking them down.
Okay.
Can I do the next one too?
Again?
So,
I want to
ready.
discuss that one too.
Oh, it looks like you got the one after that too.
This is the coronavirus funds round 2. So these can be used
Which is awesome.
for a variety of things, a lot more so than the other ones. Again, so this includes water, wastewater infrastructure, as well as broadband. Broadband, it's limited they want to make sure that you're investing in new technology and not old technology. So there are a little bit more restrictions around the broadband infrastructure that you can install. But for water and wastewater, it's unlimited. And so, again, we'll get $446,000 over 2 years. And then the question is, what do you want us to spend it on? And
Not
Can we-
Del Rey Avenue.
no, we can't spend it on streets.
Wastewater treatment.
So,
Can we use it? Yeah, can we use
well,
it on the
so one
existing
thing-
water treatment plant that we're doing?
well, one thing that we've been talking about is there's a lot more water infrastructure improvements that we need to take care of as well. And so School Street being one of them. And so rather than going out for a loan for School Street, using the ARPA funds for that, as well as some matching funds with our capital funds. And so that would help take care of that issue, because the challenge with some of the water issues that we have is we don't qualify for some of the low interest loans, because they're not low pressure issues. They're not, some of them are fire supply issues, but they're not major issues causing significant potential health challenges.
Sure.
And so that's why it's hard for us to get those low interest loans on them. So if we
I'd rather
can,
use this money then rather than pulling out of reserves
Mhm.
to do projects like that, we should be using this money for that.
Well, is there any way to use this on something that directly impacts the dollars that our citizens are spending?
The economy.
Well, I'm thinking specifically like how hard it is for people to pay their water bills sometimes.
and so
And
this,
especially since we've been increasing rates,
Mhm.
and we need to do that, I know,
Right.
but.
And so this can go to pay people that have a balance. And so one of the questions I would want to propose something to council to use those funds in that manner. Because there are, some people may have been struggling, but we're able to pay it, right? And so
Yeah.
Needs to be some real good criteria
Well,
set.
and Washington Gorge Action Programs is leveraging similar funds to help people pay for rent and utilities as well. I'm not saying we can't use it for that. I just want to, and I don't, in talking with Mary, the list was 1 page, which it sounds like a lot, but that's just all past due. And so that could be even people that just didn't pay on the 10th. So in the grand scheme of things, we don't have that many past due accounts.
Good.
But we are reaching out and trying to have people access the funds that they need, because we typically assume that if they're behind in their water bill, they might be behind on other bills as well.
Mhm.
So can we pass this as you've presented and ask you or some staff to come up with suggestions for like the top 2 or 3 ways you think we could spend this money that would be of the best benefit?
Can
to-
I like that,
Yeah.
I would also like to issue a challenge to the council and the mayor to maybe brainstorm, come up with some ideas of their own.
Well, I was just gonna say, this could be a way to revitalize our broadband program. Because that would cover a staff person right there, some of that money, and then actually
Could it
No,
go
but
to
it's-
park?
new projects, though, right? Not new plans.
Could it go?
I
to
believe
park-
it is for construction, not plans.
Could it go to
Yeah.
the Park Plaza, for example?
No,
Okay.
Can it
because
go
it's not
to-
water, sewer, or broadband.
Duh.
But the way that I'm looking at it though is how can we leverage those funds on some of those things to free it up, but it doesn't work really well. Because water sewer is its own. It does free it up for broadband though.
And it does it, if we were to say broadband, would it all have to go to broadband, or could we split it
Yeah, you can
up?
split it up. It also talks about, so kind of like more or less the way to get it into the general fund, to help possibly spur something like that is for revenue reduction. So replace lost public sector revenue. So there's a formula and a spreadsheet that I can go utilize to kind of quantitate what that looks like.
And then we were still waiting on a cost estimate to use the well as a primary water source. Are we looking at treat
Yeah.
the water for iron? Was that what it was? So what's the,
Well, it's treated for the high pH is the
so
more
that
challenging.
sounds like another
Yeah,
project,
right,
is
right.
making
Could
the
we
well
use-
more available.
Yeah, use some of this water maybe, or use some of this water, use some of this money for the proposed Kanaka Creek well that we were talking about up on the top of Kanaka Creek
Reservoir.
Reservoir.
Um,
Because that would be a new project.
It would be, but I don't know that it's gonna go to planning. I think it would have to go to a construction phase,
Sure.
but I can look into that.
But I would say, I mean, whatever project we think is gonna benefit the most
Yes.
people.
Mhm.
Yes.
The most people benefit people the most. It's because I see this differently
Yeah,
because
because there's
That's a
actually
good
giving
point.
awards to utility payments.
Yeah.
Or finding a way to flatten the curve on rates.
Mhm.
Or spur economic development so they have jobs to then.
Right, and there's
I
a
mean,
lot of
it's-
different ways to look
yeah.
at it. You're right.
Mhm.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
So.
All right,
I'll reach out. I know, I think Kelly with the SGA had, reached out to me a while back when this was still there.
So Amy, you're doing this one.
It's my
You
turn.
Well, you just said it.
which one is that? Well,
Make a motion to approve the U.S. Treasury Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund Award Terms and Conditions Agreement as presented.
But then you also had a caveat. on
Well,
that.
it's
No,
just-
that's
this
not a
is to accept
caveat.
it.
It's not a caveat.
This is
on the
just to
motion.
accept
It's
it,
just
yeah.
staff
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right.
Just second.
all right, first and second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, looks like you're up. Councilmember Dave Cox.
Okay, so, Robert and I went up and met with, the Krugs and Mrs. Dobley, and, we had a really good conversation. And basically what I suggested to them was that it was not the city's responsibility to post their property for trespassing. After we had that conversation, they agreed that they would put signs up, which they have done. I do not know what the impact of that signage has been. I know that the cemetery has gone in and removed on the right-hand side of the garage that's next to the cemetery. Mrs. Dobley had put some boards and a post to keep people from walking through there onto her property. Well, the cemetery district decided that that was on their property, and so they went in and literally cut them off of the. So there's just these stubs of wood sitting on Mrs. Dobley's garage, and the post has been pulled, and now people have access along her garage. So it just seems like, people are kicking the hornet's nest, and it's driving me crazy. Anyway, one of the things that I brought up in the last meeting was the city's liability on that cliff, on the piece of property that goes right out to Rock Creek. And so I asked the staff to come up with some different signage ideas. And so that's what's in these examples here. And I just wanted to bring them forward and get somebody's opinion on what looks like something that we might be able to post. And, if Ken wanted to weigh in on it as far as what legally we could do, if we could, come up with an emergency ordinance or not an emergency ordinance, but an ordinance like the county did up on Piper Road, something like that. And that we could reference a particular ordinance on that sign to maybe give the impression that there's a little more meat behind this than just, this is private property, no trespassing. Something to convince the public that, folks, this is people's property here that you guys are
But people
trespassing
can
on.
go and look there. That's
Well,
not
yeah.
public, that's public property.
Well, it is. But then you have the liability of, there's no warning there about that cliff and dropping off. And I don't know if we have a liability there or not. And I don't know if Ken wants to weigh in on that or not.
Ken, I think you could do *9. I'll let you, or *6 if you want it. Yeah,
Yeah,
you can.
he was on there before.
Okay, you can unmute now.
Hey, that worked. Yeah, so I think, can you guys hear me all right?
Yep.
Thank you.
I haven't done this with a phone before, so kind of a newbie. But yeah, you know, the signage is the right idea because, you know, under the recreational user immunity, you have to warn the public of latent defects. I don't know how latent that defect is. It's a cliff, but yeah, you definitely want to put a sign up, and anything that just communicates to the public in a very visible way, not to just blithely walk off the darn thing, is going to protect you.
Okay, so do you put something like danger, do not go beyond this point? Or you put a picture of a guy falling off a cliff and write danger? I mean, what do you suggest?
I like the picture version better because those people who aren't English speakers might understand a little bit better if you have a visual image, and that's used very commonly in you know, for latent defect warnings for cliffs.
Okay.
And there are, yeah, examples in the packet on page 155.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see those all over
Do we have a
Hawaii.
fence? Is there a fence
Pardon?
there? There's
No,
no
there's
fence
no
there
fence.
right now, right?
No.
Should we consider putting up some kind of barrier, or would that increase our liability if the barrier fell?
Maintenance of the barrier is the challenge, and as we've seen with barriers trying to be put up on some of the properties, I don't know how much, although they're not trying to get through there, but it is a right of way, so so as far as the barrier location, it would be at the fence, or it'd be at the cliff. It wouldn't be at the beginning of that right of way.
Yeah. But we could post the sign up at the start of the right of way, correct? Like, for example.
No, I'd put it
a
closer
danger
to
cliff
the
edge.
Yeah, it has to be within so many feet of the danger.
Does it?
Yeah.
Did you have a comment, Ben?
Just want to interrelate this with two other things. So you all received a petition from the neighborhood up there that's an information item in your packet where several of the property owners have requested you to consider actions to alleviate the problems that trespassing and abuse have brought to our neighborhood. In addition, the enhancement of a pathway to Rock Creek would benefit our community and visitors alike. And so I think that some of the discussion about fencing or what would happen to reduce that abuse, as they put it, might be something that we can talk about more. And you can take some immediate steps to provide warnings right now. The Planning Commission at their last meeting reviewed their remaining work plan for this year and some public suggestions that were put forward. One of them that they wanted to take on and offer their assistance for was this request. And so planning for in some way to address what the petition has said, they're willing to help you with that.
Awesome.
And
Who's willing to help us?
the Planning Commission.
Okay.
So I think that you can separate some things, plan while doing, get a sign up, and then figure out what else needs to happen up there.
You know, if you and Dana went up there and you showed her, she would probably have some professional opinions on how to make that better.
You know, one of the things that I thought about too is Rock Creek, as far as I know, all falls under county property, if I'm not mistaken. But
It's private.
Mostly.
Pardon?
If there's some private ownership there,
Okay, but how about from Rock Creek Bridge up to the falls?
there's private ownership.
The creek
there private?
itself is not, but up to the banks of the creek, there's some private.
On the
Okay,
east
well,
side.
that, and, you know, I was trying to think out of the box here. Why don't we somehow figure out how to build some type of a trail
Yes.
from Rock Creek?
Right.
And instead of people trying to maneuver up through all the rocks,
Preach on,
there's
baby.
actually a trail going up there and a place where they can view the falls.
I
Yes,
have
please.
daydreamed about that for years.
I mean,
I
man,
think
what
that's
a
the
neat
ideal
spot.
place. Yeah.
They've got waterfalls over on the Oregon side that have all these trails going to them. Why can't we do something like that?
We can. It might be super expensive, but it could happen.
Well, you know what? We got a jail work crew.
Well, then here's the other thing is that I'm pretty sure it's not just the city that's,
What's
should
that?
be, it should be a task force, not just the
Well, we
city.
started
Sure.
a task force. We
Sure.
created a task force, right? That you're on and
Yeah,
Robert is
Robert,
on.
And, yeah,
And the sheriff's office had some representative,
that's right,
did they
and,
not?
Yeah, yeah.
And somebody from the neighborhood, and somebody from the county, Tom.
You're correct. The cemetery district.
But I know,
and
I know
there
that,
is, right, so we just need to keep that going.
but I
Yeah.
know that the Department of Corrections has work crews, that they have projects that they work on.
Cool.
I mean, they're down there Deacon Rock working on the rock sometimes, rebuilding buildings. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there that would not cost us any money.
That's brilliant.
Like a forest use success.
Forest youth
yeah,
program.
Stuff like that.
You know, yeah. So,
I also want to let you know, so prior to the road vacation coming to council, about a year before that, they submitted a land swap proposal. The initial proposal involved basically using the cemetery property and going through from the cemetery property, also part of the McKinnon property and the Dobley property, and just getting access to the water that way in exchange for the right of way. When the first issue was the McKinnon property, and so they narrowed it down so that it would just be the Dobley property access. But when I initially approached it with the cemetery district, the challenge was conflict of uses. And, you just didn't want people with, the image was, flip-flops and beach chairs walking through a service.
Sure.
And so I received information back from the cemetery district recently saying that they feel that they can work with the Dobleys and provide access between the fence and the garage and that easement, and create a shared easement and provide access that way to the water. And so the question is do we want to convene that group possibly, or do we want to have a meeting with the cemetery district as well to all get on the same page to see if that would be an option that they would be interested in doing? What that would mean is, since we're just swapping properties and we're still maintaining access to the creek, and it's the access that people actually want, I feel that in essence, that right-of-way vacation would be able to move forward, pending everything working out.
One of them, but the other one would have to stay.
Yes.
The one that goes straight to the creek
Yes.
is the one that could move forward. But the one that
Yes,
runs
yes.
parallel to the creek would have to stay.
Right, right.
That sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
I
So-
think that's awesome.
So I'll reach out to them and convene that group, and we'll see, and talk with the Dobleys to see if they're still interested in doing that, and to see if it's a viable path forward.
And would you do that in place of asking the planning commission to weigh in?
They're kind of connected with that process.
Or would you
but-
want,
They've offered their assistance. However you want to use that or not use that is kind of up to you.
so if we don't need them, I don't know.
They have a lot on their plate anyway,
It's-
but
Yes, they do.
but we can see again, like they are part of that group, and so they can kind of feedback to the planning
Oh,
commission. if there's
someone from
anything.
planning commission is
Yes,
on that?
yeah,
Oh,
yes,
awesome.
yeah,
Okay, cool.
So do we still need to put a sign in?
I think it'd be prudent in
Yeah.
the short term anyway, yeah.
Right.
So, I guess I would say you've heard
We can-
what Ken's
Pick a graphic.
Yeah.
suggestion was. Pick a sign.
Pick the one with the guy falling off.
Yeah,
Okay.
pick the one with the guy falling off the edge. Yeah.
The funniest one.
We can do that.
Okay, if you get that installed, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done.
Thanks for staying on it, Dave. I'm super stoked about access to the water.
Yeah, and and
Great.
Yeah.
all those no trespassing signs are unsightly.
If they
I
are,
would like for them to be
but why can't, well,
unnecessary. I would love for them to be unnecessary.
yes, yeah, wouldn't we all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Is the-
Okay,
it's like
I'm
the-
still gonna pursue the trail
No,
Yeah, from
there's-
though. I think that'd be
Okay.
It
awesome,
would, I agree.
and that would fit right in
And
with
I know
the
a
tourism and
I know
everything.
somebody who's a professional, nationally known trail designer.
Really?
Yeah.
And who might that be?
Somebody I know.
How well do you know them, Paul?
Yeah, pretty well.
Well, good. Well, maybe you can talk to them.
Okay.
We want to go just through the packet instead of on the screen?
Oh, yeah, I didn't even bring it up on the screen.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, I didn't pull up that one. Sorry. Sorry, my,
Now I understand what my wife says when she says, I can't sit here and watch you do that.
right?
My son wants me to watch him play Minecraft. Oh, it's just so mind-numbing.
These were good slides, by the way.
So again, these slides were provided through the provided by Ken and with the permission from Alice Ostick. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And it was initially presented at the Washington State Association of Municipal Attorneys Spring Conference. And so this just kind of goes through what is allowed for affordable housing tools. And it talks about sort of just the state of affordable housing in Washington overall, using one of the AWC studies, and things that are affecting housing affordability. And in my involvement with the Homeless Housing Council, one of the things that they also try to encourage is reaching people before they're evicted. And so trying to keep people in their homes, because it's much easier to keep people in their homes than it is to get them from being houseless into a house. And so
Finding a house for them.
well, right, exactly. So if we can keep them in, so again, preventing evictions and kind of preventing that exodus is ideal. And then getting, people into homes, so housing prices, although someone made the comment at an earlier meeting that timber prices might start going down. So that'd be great.
Yeah.
But again, the rental market and the housing market in the Gorge is definitely a challenge. And so this talks about, what we can have, what impact we can have on housing affordability and the overall affordability. So we have utilities, we have a senior discount, and we also have, it's a low income senior discount, and then we also have a disability discount. So if you're on Social Security disability, you can also be eligible for the discount. The question is do we want other discount programs? Do we want a sliding scale based on what your income is? That could be another model that we can do, again, to look at the overall affordability of living here.
When you say discount for what?
Utility rates.
Okay.
Right. So your monthly utility bill.
Okay.
So this is a direct result of what happened at the last meeting.
Yes.
Relating to Brian McKenzie,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that vote.
Yeah, that's what started this
Yeah.
process.
So that's the full background, is that affordable housing has been identified as a goal. But when we had the opportunity to make that happen, the tool that was provided for that particular goal was met favorably. So what tools are available to us that we can maintain that goal? Or like Leona said, don't make it your goal. If you don't want to use any of the tools.
Yeah.
Or just to understand that that is a tool and maybe not be as quick to, so people just
Or add additional metrics to that. Like, we didn't even know how many units we were talking about.
up to 17.
He doesn't even know how many units he's talking about
Oh,
either.
right,
Yeah.
I know,
yeah.
but like
But it was-
that could be like one unit and we
Right.
waive all the system
No,
development.
you'd only waive it for one unit. Right.
And I actually talked to Brian when I was coming in, to set up. Brian was just leaving, so he talked, he still is interested in meeting with Robert and I and whatever other builders or developers want to meet to discuss what kinds of things can the city do to entice these developers to come to Stevenson versus going to Clark County. Of course, I don't know why they would want to go to Clark County. It costs them 3 times as much, but so that process is still.
Well, we as a
in the works too.
city don't have a lot of knobs at our disposal. I mean, we
Well, that's
can't.
was the,
And
part of the
that's what
purpose
we're
of
talking
this.
about,
right,
It's all about.
And so the ones that we have that I can identify are with water sewer rates and development fees for the if you're building a new property and you want to develop and connect to the sewer, then you have to pay, what is it now, $15,000 or so? And I have said a few times in the past that I think that number should be discounted for whatever we term an affordable house, whether it be an apartment or an individual house. Say you'd set a number, and I'm just going to make things up. So if it's under 1,000 square feet, then you get the reduced development. Because right now, a lot of developers, they have to spend $15,000 to build a house. Well, they have to recover the cost of that. So they do that by building a bigger house that they can charge more for. You know, that's one of the reasons why houses get bigger and bigger and bigger. And if we were able to discount it such that it encouraged smaller, more affordable houses to be built, I think it'd be a win.
So what we could also do is, and this was part of the conversation Robert and I had up in his driveway, we could, the fees that are associated with a developer coming on board, rather than having those fees paid up front, move those fees out for a 2-year period so that he's got a fixed monthly cost over a 2-year period, rather than coming up with a lump sum of money to buy these fees all right now. That way, then he has a plan on how to amortize those payments, I guess, for lack of a better term, rather than us just saying, hey, we're gonna grant you or loan you this amount of money. Well, we're not gonna loan them. They're just gonna pay them on a monthly basis as opposed to lump sum. You know, that's another option that's available.
Another thing too, kind of goes to the grant portion, is we can be an applicant for a community development block grant, which would, and the proportion of that would be proportionate. So if he only did 1 unit, well, whatever proportion that infrastructure improvement, if it were needed, would go towards that. So it helped bring down the cost of any improvements that he would have to make if he had to make any frontage improvements.
And there was frustration at the last meeting because we had said, this is the direction we want to go. This is the tool we're interested in. And then we voted against using that tool based on a lot. So, oh, that's right. But well, it wasn't going to go well.
But I don't remember that.
But thank you. Yes.
We identified that as the tool. It's
a tool. Right. And so I'm going to go down to, so, and this is where we were able to use that tool, is in the Constitution. You can help the poor and infirmed. And so that's where the poor is, you know, it was defined in that agreement.
Can you go
specific
back up to the one with the
T-shirt?
And can you guys catch me up on the nuances? Because I missed last meeting because I was off on some tropical island or something.
Brian came to us with a proposal for up to 17 affordable housing units, and you guys were presented with a grant amount based on 17 units. These are the SDUs.
No. It was
He wanted the 400 and some thousand.
No, it was. This is the maximum amount that he would be able to get, but it would only apply to the SDCs, would be waived only for whatever he builds. So if he only built one, we would only waive the SDCs for one.
Right.
But the maximum amount would have to be in there because that's what council would be approving up to a certain amount of units.
And we were
And-
waiving those fees.
And there was a lot of public comment about two things. One, we're all paying so much money. Our wastewater treatment, fees have gone up, up, up. We're spending all this money that we can't afford. And now you're talking about waiving fees for developers. That was the first point they made. And the second point they made was we already have affordable housing in 2 other locations on Vancouver Avenue. And we're not really interested in having more because that potentially reduces the, value of our land
Well,
property.
and
So there's
in
a little bit of that
sense,
NIMBY.
it also kind of creates that neighborhood, and having grown up in that neighborhood, being the slums essentially, I think it's best if affordable housing is spread amongst everyone. If they're citizens, they should live among the citizens.
So I asked Liana to come back to this one, because this is a great way, very visual way to kind of wrap our heads around what ways that we can make a difference.
And so it's kind of the T chart that talks about market incentives for private investment versus direct public investment, and then generating units versus generating funds. And so some of the things that we've done to under the generating funds and direct public investment is the sales tax credit that we took. That brings in about $300 to $400 a month.
Only $2,700 or something, right? In there now?
Right. Yeah. Right now, we started collecting it last year, and so it's a slow growth fund. The good news with that fund is because of the size of community we can use those for Section 8 vouchers. So those could go towards rental assistance.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we can also leverage it for a bond for any affordable construction or purchasing of land or anything.
And your name's gonna be on that bond, right? Not mine?
No, that revenue will be the security for that bond.
Right.
But it's not much when it's only a couple $100.
Yeah.
That's some of the steps that we're taking. Community land trust is one thing that we've talked about. And I don't know, I think they were looking at trying to do something. So Mid-Columbia Housing Authority is the Gorge regional organization that I would look to help manage something of that nature because it's kind of in their wheelhouse. I do believe that the city of White Salmon, there's a group there that was talking with them about something. I don't know if they moved forward with it. But that's another option. But again, what it comes down to is the funds to then purchase that land, because that's kind of where it starts. And so a lot of these talk about collecting those funds. And so that housing trust fund, we can get it, or even a housing levy, so that would be property taxes. And that would be a vote of the people. But I think because of part of the reason why our housing is the way it is because of tourism. And so it does make sense that it's a sales tax. When we floated it to voters, it failed 49 to 51. Since then though, it has become councilmanic, meaning that the council can enact that sales tax. Or you can put it to voters again. There's nothing that says you can't put a decision to voters. It's just
So just a comment then. So the lower right quadrant of this is basically on the taxpayer, correct?
No.
Anything that has to do with the bond or the housing trust fund, the housing levy, land value, that all falls directly on the individual taxpayer.
No, so the sales tax credit is actually a credit back from the state. It's part of the 6.5% that they're already collecting. They're kicking it back to us. So no taxes were raised for that 6.5%.
Okay.
For some of those others, yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, and then, for example, the one to the left, or left lower, is more for the developer.
Right, market incentives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole
That
house.
whole, that whole
Discounts.
side, that
Yeah,
whole left
yeah,
side is
yeah.
all,
Mhm.
yeah, okay,
Mhm. And so that's where the impact fees came in,
sure.
on the finance side.
When I went through all these, I mean, this really helped me a lot understand this a little bit more. These were good slides.
Right. And so, again, and some of the things that I mentioned in, as far as policy tools that we have, is that inclusionary zoning, which we currently have as voluntary, but we could make mandatory or required.
Can you remind me what that is, the inclusionary zoning?
So that would be where if you wanted to do a subdivision,
Greater than X you needed to include.
yes, X number of affordable units.
Yeah.
And they would have to be for a certain number of years, correct?
That's a fairly common city zone, isn't it, throughout the country?
Right, and the city of Camas has a similar challenge in that it's also voluntary, but people don't pick them up on it because it's an incentive based. So you allow greater density when you include it. But again,
But if you're a developer and you have lots of money and you just want to make lots of money, there's no real incentive to do it because you're not really worried about it.
Another disincentive is the market out here doesn't want more dense lots.
Right.
And so developers aren't looking to maximize density on properties. So it becomes something that's totally irrelevant, that voluntary increase.
So are you looking for direction? Or are you presenting possibilities?
well, so yes, so I'm looking for direction on how you want to implement the goal of increasing affordable housing in the city. And so this is where these are the tools that we have. Again, that sales tax credit we already took. The sales tax we already tried. Real estate excise taxes, again, we can't do that. Those are REIT 2 funds that we don't have the ability to collect. So there's lodging taxes for workforce housing. And so in the packet towards the end of the packet, I actually did sort of where our transit stops are and put circles around it. It's on page 180. And so that would impact those areas. But do we want to spend the lodging tax funds on workforce housing? And so that's another conversation to have.
Is that the same as the TAC funds?
It is the TAC funds, yeah.
So what is the tax increment financing bill?
That's new, and I'll do a webinar on that later.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Again, it just passed.
Okay.
The concept of these is that all the taxing agencies affecting an area agree to freeze their collections at the current level, and any increase of those current tax collections goes into a pot of money to be used for a specific purpose, housing in this case.
Oh,
and so it takes buy-in from each one, or a majority, supermajority, something of all those taxing agencies to say that this is a big enough issue that we're willing to sacrifice some portion of our projected.
Kind of like getting all the fire district and everybody, sheriff's office and DEM and all those guys on board for the new fire hall.
That's all. So.
Okay. Interesting.
Well, the TAC funds, the lodging fund, the way the lodging taxes work now, it's so hard, it's prioritization.
Right, right.
But
And
it's
so
worked so well for us.
And I think if you add into this, the conversation that Robert and I are going to have with developers and find out some different ways to maybe leverage some of this stuff to bring them in, maybe it'll help.
So this is.
Well, the lodge in particular, Community Lodge in particular, is the one employer in the area that can really benefit from affordable housing. I'm just thinking out loud, that if somebody is going to be taxed in order to develop
Yeah.
affordable housing, the big employer that employs the folks for low wages.
So
We're on
the,
that committee.
well, yeah, I was gonna say, so the challenge is the tax isn't gonna be raised or anything, so the money that we currently have set aside for
Mhm.
events,
Yeah.
that would be siphoned off and put towards housing.
And infrastructure.
Right.
I mean, a big chunk of those funds has gone for infrastructure improvement projects.
And it's not the lodge that's being taxed,
Right.
it's the room.
Right, sure, yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Right, well, but still, it affects the, yeah. There would be some pushback, I imagine, if we were to shift funds from events to anything else. People like the events. I like the events.
Well, our business, they thrive on those events.
Yeah.
Because when you have events, you bring people in and our
Absolutely.
businesses,
Totally.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I don't think we can do that.
what I was thinking that we would get out of this is identify some tools, see the ones that kind of pique our interest the most, or the ones we can even do, and then start zeroing in on them and making them a tool.
Which ones do you like?
Oh,
I like
fine.
the
I don't
idea of
really
a,
like any of them.
I like the idea of
Right, and so
a
that's,
loan. You know, we can help the developer get in without having to pay that lump sum. The money still comes in, it just comes in spread out. That's the
Yeah.
one
it's like a
that,
payment plan.
Yeah.
that made the most
That's
sense
the
to
one you were
me.
just talking about too, Dave.
Would it be a developer or could it apply to an individual home builder as well?
Well, if,
How-
if,
In what scenario?
Like if, Bob wanted to build a house on a lot over there and he's not a developer. And he has to come up with a $15,000 development fee, right? But he's just some schmuck.
Oh, I see. So not in the necessarily the realm of affordable housing, but
Well, no, it would be affordable housing.
Yeah, so long as his house that he's building meets some criteria of affordability.
or like an ADU.
Yeah.
If I want to put an
That's
ADU on my property, what kind of incentive do I have to put that ADU on there?
But then we have to lock
Well-
in to what is the affordable housing criteria.
The way that currently works is it becomes part of your loan.
Construction loan, yeah.
So when you get the loan for the property, all the permitting
already-
fees, all the connection fees go in, and
Okay.
they go in at whatever the current rate
Sure.
is over time. So there's financing available to them. It may reduce that.
Could we legally do it interest-free? And that might be a gift of
That,
taxpayer funds or something like that. Maybe you couldn't do
Of
that.
not paying those fees?
Right, but it would, the way we could do it though, yeah, is if it were truly affordable housing, which is 80% of AMI. Like we'd have to define, and there would have to be deed restrictions then on that property
Yeah.
to ensure that it stayed affordable for a period of time in
Yeah.
order to allow for that to
the loans
happen.
paid off.
That's nice.
20 years,
Mhm.
because otherwise, what if they paid off in 4 years?
Right,
Thank you very
Right,
much.
right.
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
That's a good one.
So do you want me to look at reviewing the structure for our impact fees?
Yeah.
To accommodate this
so.
kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then I can also, do you want me to also look at like a sliding scale rate discount structure for affordability overall for payments? The challenge, so right now we're using senior services to run all of that, the financing. And so if we took it out of the senior realm and just
Yeah.
took it into affordability, running that finance stuff, it's,
I have a question for Ken. Ken, is Ken still on here?
yes, he is.
My question is this one slide that talks about aid to the poor and the infirm, it talks about credit not to be loaned. Are we, when we talk about these fees and spreading these fees out over a 2-year period, is that credit?
You have the exception.
It's allowed by statute.
It is
Did you
allowed?
hear me?
Yes.
It is allowed by statute. Yeah.
Okay.
because of this exception, because it's considered necessary support.
Well, even if it says except for the necessary support of the poor and the infirm. That's what I'm wondering about is if you have a developer come in and says, you know, I want to build 15 houses. And they may not all be necessarily, is it only the ones that are?
Yeah.
It would only be the ones that would
Okay.
meet those criteria.
All right.
Yep.
That's right.
Okay, that was my, okay, thank you.
So if they're gonna build 15 homes and one of them is affordable housing, they only get that
That one.
credit for the one.
Yeah, okay.
Which I don't think was entirely clear to everybody at last month's meeting.
Yeah.
And then as another,
I'm not blaming you, I'm just saying
No,
we
no,
didn't do a good job at.
so we kind of agreed that the density bonus might be moved, but offering different incentives to encourage an affordable home and then sort of a density for, you know, like to get away from it feels an awful lot like an affordable housing compound and conjuring up these images of like, not in my backyard again, but
Yeah.
if we make, you don't, or make however many you want, I guess, then these are the options, these are the bonuses that are available to you. Like one of the things they mentioned was reducing parking needs, and we've floated that idea plenty of times. So maybe not density bonuses, but just bonuses for doing it at all. And then you kind of break up.
I think we need to be aware or careful of the way that these look to the public as well. Because again, like we're saying, we're willing to waive some of these fees for developers who are going to be making money, right, on their projects. And we all are still paying, and we're still all paying.
Well, we're not waiving the fees because that was the issue last meeting, remember,
Yeah.
with Brian. What we're saying is we're going to spread those fees out.
That was what we
Yeah.
suggested. No, he wanted, it was gonna be a forgiveness.
And it was a
Right.
fundamental.
Yeah, no,
rationale,
Brian
and
was
that's why
gonna be a
bring up
waive
that
Yeah.
will have only been
last
one.
time.
Right.
And what we're saying here is we're going to spread
Principle
those.
of the thing.
That
Yeah.
sounds like low hanging fruit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so do you think that this gets around that objection?
If I review the SDC structure and see if we can base it on square footage possibly,
Mhm.
it's still applicable to everyone. It's not only for affordable housing. So,
And it's not just for developers who are out to make a buck, it could be
It's
for
for
an
anyone,
individual
yeah.
who wants to build
Yeah.
their own home.
But the home needs to be categorized as affordable housing for a certain number of years.
Yeah.
no, so I was looking at just reviewing the SDC structure in general to see if we can, the challenge becomes, it still takes a certain amount of money to get the pipes to your house.
Right.
Sure.
I don't care what size meter you have. And so that's what the SDCs pay for. So.
Are
But-
you
but I'll look
saying
at
that you want to look at our SDC charges, for lack of a
Right.
better, I know it's redundant, in general and not just as it relates to affordable housing?
Right.
And then maybe with an eye for the affordable.
I mean, the sewer rates, the sewer SDCs are going up. Because when I did them last time, I didn't have a clue. Well, I wasn't comfortable using the estimate for the wastewater treatment plant when we were in the middle of value planning for it. Now that I have an estimate, I'll plug that in and we'll go as well as with the other.
So that needs to
systems.
happen
So
anyway.
it needs to happen anyway. Right. And I can see if there are other ways to look at it as well, to see if there can be, kind of like you were talking about earlier, is there a way to right size it from a McMansion versus a tiny home? And we'll see how we can do that.
I'm not in favor in general of changing the way that we're using the lodging taxes. Although I could be convinced if we said anything that is over and above X, we
Mhm.
might put into that separate pot, which is what we were talking about for something else.
Okay.
but that would be a way to do it.
So possibly set aside funds.
Yeah.
Boy, they're busy.
More interrelated discussion with planning commission activities. So they're in the middle of that zoning discussion about generally inclusionary zoning, or at least raising the possibility of what people can do with property to build it, affordability into their own developments. That is slowed down. There's now a subcommittee of the planning commission that's working on the public engagement plan. And so where they're at now is they're approaching a crossroads where much of what that committee wants to focus on is changing the way that the city at large, including all of you and the planning commission and staff, interact with the public, and then the project specific approach to considering zoning change. And so the way that I see that some of them want to take it would be to use the zoning change as a model that then could be presented for future decisions on things.
Use the
like
same
this.
type of process then for other decisions.
On things like this.
Yeah.
And so just noting that that's interrelated, there's conversations that are happening at the planning commission level, at a subcommittee of the planning commission level to bring information and to bring effort to solving this issue. So part of what they get twisted around in is that the zoning code changes don't do anything to affect development. I mean, to advance development, that still requires a developer to come in and do that. So it's not in itself a solution. And noting that there are other actions that are needed, noting that the city council is investigating other actions is a big part of this whole story about how we build in affordability. And that's become a different keyword than just affordable housing. So can we afford to live in this community that we love? Our sewer rates is going to increase to the point where we can't do it. Are we going to be able to afford to repave the roads with what we have? So all of that is a big part of this. It's not just affordable housing with the capital A. It's affording to live in this place that we love.
So when I met with the Frank John's group, it dawned on me that there's a nuanced difference between outreach and engagement. It's one thing to broadcast information. Another thing is to actually encourage and entertain and facilitate engagement.
Face-to-face types of engagement, yeah.
Especially so that she can finesse the finer points. The thing that I've been finding is that the report that we financed that spurred all of this, not many people have read. And as reports go, they do really hard to make it digestible. Lots of graphs, and this is why we're here. This is what we found. This is what we're suggesting. It's as reports like that go, you're not going to get it in one session. But as reports like this go, this one's not bad. And it really does highlight what we're trying to accomplish. And until that part of it is presented properly, but we're getting there. So I think we're kind of getting off track, but that's to Ben's point, this is all going to be part of a much bigger conversation as we move. And yeah, the affording to live here is, what can we do about that? Yes, this is what we have to do, but what about the end user? Okay, so you have some direction then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Is there more?
Out of all that.
Right. Is there more you need, or?
No, I think the rest will just have to be fleshed out during the next strategic planning.
One of the things that troubles me when thinking about how it goes is the land use review process. And so the city council making a decision to fund something when it may require conditional use permit from the city council. And so, or from the planning commission. And so which of those two things comes first? Whether a condition of coming to you for a request would be that they've got their land use approvals in place. So that when the approval or the question of approval goes to the planning commission, then they're not, no part of the process is influenced by, well, the city council already made this decision on this, it's a done deal no matter what. I don't know what's the appropriate timeline there, but it's something that makes me uneasy.
Well, yeah, and we shouldn't be second guessing all of the work that we have asked the planning commission to do. I mean, if we ask them to do a job and they go through, get in the weeds and they do all of that hard work and then come to us and say, here is what we have found out and this is why. I mean, we should take a really hard look at that, and we should really take a hard look at, if we're going to say something different, we should really have our ducks in a row when we do that. Because they need to know that they have our support.
Absolutely. Scott and I were both on the planning commission when the mayor came to us and gave us a good tongue lashing and did not like what we had done.
How does that make you feel?
And did not like that.
Yeah, exactly.
But as council members, when the planning commission comes to us with a piece of work, we're responsible to do our due diligence and make sure that it's not just a blank slate.
Yes, correct,
Pass it,
correct,
do our due
correct.
diligence. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, good discussion. Thank you all very much. There are some informational items in your packet. And now staff reports. So no Carl today, Ben. Or do you have something from Carl?
Oh, give it.
Okay. Ben?
Rock Creek Drive, stormwater coming from Scania Lodge area. I submitted to you guys the raw numbers of the testing for that. I've been trying to get with the Underwood Conservation District, who's volunteered to help us interpret those, and they're the ones that volunteered to help us collect the samples, so that it wasn't just me not knowing what I'm doing, and the interpretation isn't just me not knowing what I'm doing on that. So they have program time to help do that tomorrow instead of in advance of this meeting. So we are very happy for their volunteer assistance in that, and we're being patient to help get that. The general summary is that there's nothing overly concerning about any of the levels. Surprisingly, some things are low. The obvious exception to that is the iron-related bacteria that creates the orange color. And so understanding more about that and any of the other levels and intricacies of the test she'll help with, and we'll get that as a written report and sent out to you as soon as possible. We won't wait till city council meeting.
And how much did that cost the city?
Set a maximum amount, not to exceed.
And we took that as direction. You had said
It was almost
1,000.
1,100, I think.
1,000 exceeded that, but not double.
That's awesome.
And that was just for the test, right?
Yeah.
Because UCD times.
Yeah, you got to take all the staff time and.
That's awesome. Good.
Yeah.
And that report is being sent out to interested members of the public. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So that'll be, just data, interpretation of data. We'll try to give you some possible next steps with that. And again, since I haven't really fully analyzed what's going on there to know exactly what the next steps are, I'm not going to venture anything here.
But there will be some remediation of some kind?
There, I don't
You don't know yet.
don't have any idea.
Well, if those numbers bear out, if they nothing alarming, then we're still left with orange water.
You're gonna share that with the county too, so that they.
Yeah.
are brought up to speed. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the approach that we have taken with this is that there was a lack of data, there was a lack of information, there's conjecture about the situation. We've brought data to it. Where it goes from there will be back to the regulatory side with Department of Ecology, the landowner side responsibility with the county.
Yeah.
And try to just lay out those steps of what would be necessary, and let the responsible parties take many of those steps. The city council can create more of those water quality monitoring program. We don't have one right now. We've done all this off the cuff, but that would be part of a larger decision.
Sounds like it was money well spent.
Thank you for all your hard work, because I know that you have been dealing with a lot on that.
It's okay. Downtown planning, we've done sort of completed a bit of a phase 1 of implementation of the downtown plan with some of the zoning changes, parking reductions that you all approved a few months back. We have hit a snag where the intern that we thought was going to come has taken a different offer. And so we're reaching out to University of Washington's program there, and they might find some direct outreach to students that they know still need something for the summer, and see if we can put that together or not. Regardless of that, we do have a component within the traffic consultant's proposal to assist with parking in some way. So we'll try to do what we can, no matter what here. We also have the grant, the Brownfields grant from the Department of Ecology to keep looking at the relocation of Columbia Street. And so we'll be issuing a request for consultant qualifications to assist with the development of our grant scope of work, and then potential implementation of that scope of work to complete that grant. We had programmed into the original proposal some parking analysis that we thought could dovetail. Maybe it's some additional analysis. We're still trying to put it together. But didn't expect that bump in the road with that.
Anything on the First Street Overlook project?
First Street Overlook project, we have a meeting to schedule a meeting
Pretty much.
on that.
Yeah.
So still trying to figure out the exact details of what design review standards Department of Transportation is going to require for our project.
And I want to bring you on board on this. I think that would be a fantastic place for a statue of York. York was the enslaved person that came across with Lewis and Clark, considered the first person of African descent to be in the Pacific Northwest. You know, there's a statue of Sacagawea on the other side of the river, and I'd like to have a statue of York on this side of the river.
One step at a time.
That's right. But if we can plan for room for it.
That was always providing a canvas.
Yes, exactly. And
So-
I think that would be a fantastic thing to put on that canvas.
So where are we at between WADOT and us in regards to them giving us that property back?
That's what the meeting will be about.
Oh, that's what we're
That's
talking
the meet-
about.
yeah, that's what we're
Okay.
talking
I said you
about.
want
Yeah.
this back, right?
Right.
Not like
So
that, we
we're-
don't.
So we're.
No,
What are we working on?
that's exactly right. Yeah, fix it first.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
But the project that they gave us the green light on is being used as a bargaining chip. So we're feeling a little,
They're using it as a bargaining chip, yeah.
Again, the Planning Commission has put immediate consideration of zoning issues on hold until they have more broad agreement about what public involvement expectations are and implement those expectations. They did review as part of their work planning for the coming year the suggestion that you all have seen to reconsider the critical areas ordinance. They're recommending not taking that up at this time. It's something that has to be reviewed on an 8-year schedule. And so we're due again in 2026. So that they're recommending not doing that. They received another suggestion to collaborate with the cemetery district on future plans, future cemetery site location planning in the city. They passed on that public suggestion. They have passed on a public suggestion to look at on-street parking regulations and defer that either to you all as something that's really a city council stewardship of those areas, or until more information is available for parking.
Are you entertaining questions on that?
Sure.
We talked about that. There was the woman who owned the house, yeah. And I was assuming we were gonna wait until the transportation plan was done. But maybe we just wanna think about issuing permits in certain parts of the city. The issue was that we were worried about the street cleaning, right?
So it's
This was the woman who lived across, who bought the house across from Bigfoot, and her renters were not able to park on the street, even though she has parking in the back. There was an issue with the parking in the back. And so she was requesting street parking in front of her house. And we were saying no parking is allowed. And one of the reasons no parking was allowed was because of street cleaning. So then we had a very brief conversation, right? Does this ring a bell? Yeah. We had a very brief conversation around maybe issuing permits so that people could park in certain places. For example, this woman could park in front of her house, or her tenants could, you know, without interfering with the street cleaners. So it could be like every day except, you know, Thursday between 4 and 6 a.m. or whatever. So that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, the planning commission has said we're not interested in looking at that at this time.
That sounds like such an easy thing. What even needs to be looked at?
one of the concerns that I have on something like that is you drive down Rock Creek or Rock Creek Drive, is that what it is? Yeah, drive down Rock Creek Drive, and all of the vehicles that are parked along that on that south side of the road,
Yeah.
and some of them are really questionable. And I don't know if I want
Like
that.
abandoned
I don't.
vehicles?
Yeah. Hey, I don't know if I want that. You know, in your downtown core. You know what I mean?
There's a limited number of residential units in the
Sure.
downtown core, so there'd be a limited number of permits based on that. You know, like Tom and Tabitha have parked on the street for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Because they had no choice.
Yeah.
Could we decide what, because we're not that regimented about street cleaning, and it's not at night.
Well, there are no parking signs.
Yeah, the signs are posted there.
I think, and I haven't gone back through the minutes to verify this, but I think that I was told that some of the concern was that at one time, long haul truckers were parking on the downtown streets, and the noise of
Their reefers running or their engines running, yes.
Was an issue. Plowing comes up as another issue. Anyway, the planning commission, I don't think weighed in on whether the city should look at that. They just said, we've got other things that are priorities over looking at this.
It feels like a really super easy thing to give a win.
Then we can do it.
Yeah.
Drunk.
Carol.
So should we do it? Do we want to
put it
allow
on-
street parking?
We'll put that on our.
Put it
issues
on
for
the
next
agenda,
meeting.
future agenda. Great. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, Ben.
They did take up the offer for Rock Creek access, and we're planning for up there. And then they took up opportunity zones and how to better promote or guide their usage in the city. So
Awesome.
other than those projects being introduced in the concepts, there's been no action on any of that, and we'll see how they go about accomplishing that.
I've been to a couple different conventions, conferences, and even the experts were like, well, that's a really good question. And as soon as we find out more, we'll be more than happy to share that. So it seems like they're, at least 2 years ago. there
On
was-
opportunity zones?
Yeah, that exactly how,
Yeah.
it still felt fairly fluid.
It is one of those buzzwords that goes out and nobody can define it really yet.
It's 5G, you know?
Well, could that be a knob in the affordable housing discussion?
It's a financing tool,
It's a tax shelter.
but yeah, it is.
It's a tax shelter for people who are looking to shelter capital gains.
But there's
Well, let's have them
parameters
shelter it
about what,
over
how
here in
they
our
can do
affordable
it.
housing crisis.
So,
So that's cool. Well,
yeah, we'll see where that goes, but they're willing to look at that. Those are additions to what they've already got going on. So including the housing, increasing residential building capacity grants and finalizing that, the shorelines management program. We'll be getting Ecology's final statement back on that soon, and then they'll take up a review of that final statement August-ish to get something to you all by September, October-ish. That's something that you approved in December of 2018, and we're now getting the Ecology's comments on it. So it's been a while, but it's in the very last stages of approval there. Ecology's comments come in the form of required and recommended changes. So there will be a list of requirements that we have to incorporate. Planning Commission and Shoreline Advisory Committee will review the recommended changes to say yes, incorporate, no, don't incorporate, or to recommend to you all, do or don't incorporate. And you'll be handed that recommendation. You can dive into those details about the recommended ones. Again, the required ones will be noted that those changes were made as required when it comes to you. They are prepared to continue doing any development review that falls on their plates, monitoring of development review in the form of conditional use permits issued over the last 2 years. This is the review cycle for that. So I think there's only been one. There might be some others that I just haven't looked into yet. There's a as time permits project to look at your land division code and to align things between if land is divided as 4 lots or less, here's a certain set of standards, and those standards are different than if it's 5 lots or more. So the neighborhood that you're creating is different just based on what the number of lots was. So we're trying to align those and definitions between how you measure lot depth, for example, is different depending on the number of lots in the land division. And so I've got to explain to different applicants who are saying, well, why was this one allowed that way? Don't know. It's just allowed that way because that's what the code says.
So it's not based just on lot size. It's based on number of lots.
Number of lots. Yep. So that's been an ongoing project that has been as time permits up to this point, and we're probably 70% of the way to a public release draft, and they haven't established any public involvement expectations for that at all. They've just been reviewing these drafts and setting aside things to present to the public. So as time permits, that'll continue to occur. I think that there was another one that's been on their plate that they agreed to, but I might have covered them all. So they've got a busy schedule.
It's a full contingent now?
It's a full contingent now. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I've been going through the packet. I apologize. I forgot to put Carl's update in there. So repairing Rock Creek intake valve. The valve was removed and is being reworked. That's the water intake up above the bridge off of Ryan Allen. Rock Creek lift station and interceptor project. Contract approval is on the agenda. First Street overlook, again, we're meeting with WashDOT hopefully next week sometime about that project to, again, set up the time for another meeting. Rock Creek storm drain repair, that again was approved with the lift station and interceptor project. And then the Rock Creek Drive planning strip revitalizations, that's just involving updating the planter strips on the west side of Rock Creek to kind of match what's on the east side. And that may be put on pause with the chlorine challenges, or waited until the fall when we get water. And so we can establish. If you've noticed people going around town looking at trees, it's our trees inventory right now. It's going on. They may also may spill over into next week as well. Wastewater treatment plant upgrades are ongoing. The PUD is installing an electrical main. So again, if you see work around Rock Creek, I believe the power is going to be out, very isolated this weekend to do some work on that. Water reservoir, just doing a bunch of ground maintenance because everything's growing right now. And then relocating utilities again in preparation for the Rock Creek lift station project. And just again, everything's growing, so right-of-way maintenance. Great news, Jonathan and Susan have both received their water treatment plant operator certifications. And so the next one they'll be striving for will be the wastewater treatment plant operator and cross-connection control specialist. And books came in this past week for them to study for that. And they're just raring to go, I'm sure. And then I already mentioned the chlorine challenges. One question, so that's all the update for Carl. If there are any questions, I can try to answer them, or you can also just email him as well. Reach out. Question about the August meeting. We will be having a fair. Do we want to reschedule the August meeting? Yes, we typically do. It's not a standing thing, but it's just a year-over-year review. So, and typically we typically do it a week earlier. Yeah.
We have done late.
Yeah, it just whatever the availability is.
Amy, you good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Earlier.
Yeah, it'll be on the 12th instead of the 19th.
Yes, and I can confirm that as well with Annie and Robert.
Speaking of which, do we need to vote to excuse them?
Yes, they gave us a heads up. Neither of them will be able to attend.
Yeah, but do we need to vote to excuse them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Motion to excuse Robert and Annie from tonight's meeting.
Second.
First and second, any other discussion? All in favor, say
Aye.
And I don't know that we voted to excuse you at the last meeting.
Was I excused? I don't know.
So.
Motion to
But we
approve
took,
Paul.
but we took care of it in the minutes, so didn't we?
Well,
Took him out of that.
yes, making sure, like, yeah. Mhm. Were you making a motion, Amy?
I was. I don't know if you.
I can't vote on that one, so it just.
Well, you could.
You were.
I was
I don't
gone.
know. Well, I know.
Made one, so your 3-meeting clock resets.
Yeah.
Right,
It doesn't
right.
matter.
Okay, gotta go.
Back to my list. The FEMA flood maps are being updated, so I don't know if anyone's had to do anything requiring looking at a flood map, but they're from, I think, the 80s, and it's on a piece of paper. And so if you want to try to overlay or see how it applies to your property, it's a real challenge. And so right now they're in the process of doing an update of that. And so it will be in GIS. And so you can do multiple layerings, get a lot more data out of it. They're using some LiDAR data and everything. And so right now they're reaching out to the jurisdictions, and then they'll be reaching out to do public engagement coming in the fall. I think overall we're of a net loss of 8 properties in the city that will no longer be affected by that flood map. But I think 1 is in and 9 are out. We'll get the addresses and we'll communicate. Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll figure it out. But definitely doing communication with those particular properties, but then also doing some sort of overall public engagement with the general community. In the Homeless Housing Council meeting, I believe I'll be appointed to that. I believe it's on the next council or commission agenda at the county. But they had a meeting yesterday, and they're moving forward. Washington Board of Action Programs is moving forward with a shower program, so allowing people that are houseless to at least have a place to shower. They're also, the county's getting a camp host for the fairgrounds to again help manage usage. They're having some people just kind of show up and not pay. And so that will help also with people that are houseless, squatting and everything as well. The school district is getting someone on board. They'll have a full-time social worker, and she'll start in August. And that will, again, help support kids and also be a conduit for the services to communicate with the children that need it. So to connect them to resources, which is a good thing.
So Liana, I don't know if you remember, but actually, I'm not sure you were here, but at one point we had a discussion about kids who were homeless and whether there was anything the city could do to assist with that, or whether there were discussions or avenues for us to be helpful. It was high school kids specifically.
And I know that the high school or the school district has put into place some things for that. They've
Okay,
got-
recently, like the
they've
last
got-
year or two?
Yeah, they've got,
Okay.
like, the kids can come to get clothing.
They created the
and-
locker.
Okay.
And so I
Yeah.
believe, I don't know if they still have it, but on Amazon, they have a list of things that they need or that they're asking for. They would send out a request, like we have people that are needing winter boots or winter
Cool.
coats. And
Okay,
so you
cool.
can come, no questions asked,
Okay.
and get food, whatever, clothing, whatever you need.
Okay.
They're also using the pool as a place for them to shower, but
great.
inconspicuously, so it's
Yeah.
not.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Karen Douglas is in charge of that,
Still?
the school district, yeah.
Still?
Yeah, she's working with One Community Alliance, so I don't know if it kind of
Okay.
can fold into that.
That has been her next iteration.
Yes.
Great.
And, Karen,
Yeah, oh yeah.
she's in.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
She also mentioned that they're having, in coordination with the overall ESD, some additional support, not full-time, for kids as well. So that'll be the school district, will get a little bit more support with that. Hazard mitigation plan update. Again, I think I left it on my desk. But the county is reviewing their hazard mitigation plan, and we're kind of a supplement to that. And so we're reviewing the projects that the city put into that plan. And there are a lot of projects that are in there that we've recently completed, which is great to see. For example, the automatic meter reads, the meter swap out is one of them. The SCADA, which we already did for our water system, and we're working on our wastewater system. The Rock Creek Lift Station having flood protection is another one. So all of these projects that we've been working on these past years, it's great to see them kind of come off the list of things that we need to do.
Yeah.
And same even in just looking at the comp plan too, just watching things kind of come off the list of things that we've been planning for years, and implementing. And so it'll be great to see sort of what's next. It's a good feeling to have, I guess. And more good feelings. The city is now connected to Cascade Locks and Bingen through transit. We have been a missing link.
Yeah.
Really, you could only take the bus to Vancouver.
Right.
And if you wanted to get to Portland, you had to go to Vancouver and then Portland. Whereas they have funding, I believe it's for 2 years, to do a bus to Bingen and then also to Cascade Locks. So you could connect to CAT through Cascade Locks and hop that all the way to Portland Transit, saving a lot of
Awesome.
time.
Yeah.
But then it also means people that want to do car-free travel in the Gorge, they can bike or ride to Cascade Locks and then come across to Stevenson as well and continue on their journey. And they also did that, they did a connection with the Dog Mountain Shuttle to ensure that people could do car-free travel
Awesome.
to hike Dog Mountain this year. So it's great. There's another link that they're trying to find funding for as well, out in the East Gorge. But glad to see one of those go away.
Does the chamber have that information? Is it readily available to people?
I don't know. I
Seems
could ask
like-
the chamber.
It seems like, and also, I don't know whether we want to put it on our site, but it seems like there's two populations that are served by that.
Mhm.
One is residents who need to get to Portland or Vancouver, but Portland is the one that hasn't been accessible, right, for appointments.
Mhm.
And the other is tourists who might want to come and visit, but who don't have cars.
Mhm.
So one is the chamber and the other is, I don't know whether that's our website or because that feels like a really big deal to me.
and Sophie with Spaney County has been on it.
Yeah.
And so has McKed
Mhm.
in organizing this, so maybe it'd be.
'Cause
worth
they
having
spearheaded
them
the whole
come
thing,
give a
right?
Presentation,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and they could answer those questions about what outreach they're doing instead of. it
Yeah,
being-
community outreach feels pretty important to make that successful if we're gonna really leverage.
So I can see if Kathy would be willing to do a presentation maybe at the next council meeting. on that.
Awesome, yeah, thank you.
Because they're, this is the, they've been going through a transportation study process, more or less, to, again, find the gaps, find the
Yeah.
need, and try to kind of connect all of that. And one of them also being that we have, there's like the link in Eastern Gorge, there's CAT in Hood River, and then we have our own wet and Mount Adam Transportation, so, but they all, take different types of funding. Well, there's going to be one gorge pass that you can purchase that can connect all of those, which is great. And so she can provide information on what they're doing. But again, this is phase 1. Phase 2, I think, is going to go to public and do more outreach on solutions and kind of what that looks like for transportation in the gorge, and build on that. So,
And then Renee T-Catch's thing.
Columbia Gorge Tourism Alliance.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. They're involved in these meetings as well. Yeah. Yep.
Kathy and McKed have been doing some really cool things, not just making these connections, but taking steps all the time to improve things. So you can now get onto Google Maps, and when you click on take transit or walk or
That's the stuff, right?
or drive,
Yay.
all that's in there because they've formatted things and pushed it up the chain
Super.
in the right way. So
So we owe them a big thank you.
been
Yeah.
doing a good
They're doing a
job.
great job.
Cool.
Mhm.
Thanks for that.
And then McKed is applying for a $2 million loan program. And so what that $2 million is, though, it was initially meant to be the remaining funds from the creation of the scenic area, but they put it in a funding opportunity for anyone to apply. But they did kind of put you'll get bonus points if you're in a national scenic area affected by wildfire in the past 4 years. So we'll see about that. But again, they'll be applying for those funds and hoping to get them. We'll see where that goes.
Real competitive one there.
Right, yeah. So, that's it, yeah.
I would entertain a motion to approve the vouchers.
Motion to approve the vouchers as presented.
Second.
First and second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. So silent all of a sudden.
Scott, I've got one of the planning commission projects that I was missing.
Yep.
I'd like to get an update on that. So city staff presented an application to amend the comprehensive plan, and that process of review through the planning commission ground to a halt because of COVID. So they received that proposal, they started vetting it, and said, we want to make sure that the public is very involved in this amendment to the comprehensive plan. This shouldn't be something that they're just doing around the table here. And then COVID. And the applicant said, yes, that's a project that you don't have to meet the timelines for. We're not going to push you on that. So that application is still hanging out there. They'll be looking at that. This is the capital improvement planning that we've been talking about. Paul will recognize it as the well duh plan. And so we're planning commission will be looking at that at the staff level. Like Leon mentioned, we're trying to increase awareness of how projects are developed and to democratize the decisions that are made with those projects. So for example, one of the projects on the tip that you approved tonight was a grinding inlay of 11th Street between 1st and 2nd. And there's no current documentation or justification on why a grinding inlay is what's necessary for that corridor. And so we're using that one block corridor as an example of how we can go through and do the well done aspects of it. Well done, you should replace the water line under this road. And so from what's under the road to what's above the road, as far as you want to see street trees here. And so our goal with that is to do an analysis of the corridor, say what improvements could be made there, bring some funding guesstimates to that, do outreach with the affected property owners along those corridors to say which of these improvements do you think are necessary, to the funding that it takes to do that, is that justified, so that when you have a project brought to you, it's better thought out. You've got some outreach that's occurred and engagement that's occurred in the decision making before it comes to you. That's going to help you make decisions on whether to include it on the tip or not, or the CIP, and then the tip also. And it will help build a case for the grant narrative when we go forward. We've done this sort of outreach. So we are trying to improve on what you've been seeing brought to you in the past, and it's a continual process. And there's
Our little town is growing up.
So that will help with that whole conversation about the tip too then, and how we go about doing that.
Yeah. Real budgeting tools for you.
Cool.
And you mentioned street trees just now, which spurred a thought in mind. I have identified at least one, maybe more trees that are about to start buckling the sidewalks. In those cases, is that purely on the landowner, the property owner, to take care of that, or is the city involved in that?
A private tree going into a public sidewalk.
Yeah. Oh, I guess. I honestly don't know who owns the land.
It's either or. There's no clear cut answer.
Well, and then like in front of Main Street, you got those trees that are dead, those great big ones.
But anyway, is that something that, I mean, should I talk to Carl about that?
We'll have to take a look, because the short answer is it depends.
Yeah. It kind of depends on whether if it was planted by the property owner and it's damaging the sidewalk. They have their own liability to be concerned about, and they may have to repair the sidewalk at their expense or grind it to prevent a trip hazard. City has some ability to control that. So, but if it's a city street tree, yeah.
So you're not talking about like the ones down on the corridor?
No, this is just
Along the city street.
City streets, there's a side, at least one that's, it's close to buckling the side.
So what we tend to do is we try to figure out if it's on city property or in the right of way and go from there.
Anybody have any reports? Something to share?
Just that Robert and I are going to be working on that whole issue, so.
EDC is dealing with the $2 million appropriation, and there's quite a battle being, people are taking major sides on, this is the $2 million that was supposedly awarded during the National Scenic Act creation, but was never distributed, right? This $1 million for Oregon, $1 million for Washington, that was promised and never delivered. So now appropriations have been made, but it sounds like Washington million, rather than coming to our EDC, is going to McEd. So our EDC is working with our legislators.
No, so it can't go to McEd, but McEd, I believe, it'll
Okay.
Anyway, that's just information.
Thank you. Who else? Oh, so we already had the one issue for next meeting. Anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
The parking permit being the one issue.
That's the
street
one.
parking.
Yep, added that to the list.
Any update on the fire hall?
No.
Okay.
All right, meeting adjourned, 9:07.